Oh, Lord.
You know, sometimes I wonder whether bringing you into the world wasn't a waste of professional effort. How many times have I told you, it's all in the mind.
Sorry, Doctor. I get worse every day.
Decide where you want the ball to go. Imagine it there, and then hit it. Like that. All right for time?
I promised Dad I'd play for evensong. I should be all right for another couple of holes anyway.
Let's see if we ever get this one finished.
Oh.
Of course, if you have no imagination, I suppose it doesn't work.
I thought I heard a shout. Hope it didn't hit anyone. Oh, the ball can't possibly have travelled that far, can it?
Not if the precedent is anything to go by.
Ah, here it is. Good.
Good?
I mean, it didn't hit anyone.
And is unlikely to be hit by anyone. Try getting it out of there. Not that one, you fool. This one. Now, if you can't manage with that, you better put the wretched thing out of its misery. Pick it up and throw it.
Decide where you want the ball to go. Oh, every time I'm close to the edge, I do that. Every single time.
Are you going to try and get it back?
If I can see it anywhere. Doctor, quickly! Look.
Can we get down to him?
There's a path further along. He's still breathing, I think.
There's nothing to be done. His back is broken. I'll go for help.
Isn't there anything we can do?
No, it's too late now. His pulse rate is weakening fast. He'll last about another 20 minutes, if that.
I'll stay.
There'll be no pain. No pain at all. I'll be as quick as I can.
Why didn't they ask Evans?
say, what a beastly thing to happen.
Grim.
Nothing I can do.
Well, actually, there is, but not for him, for me. You see, the thing is, I've got an appointment at 6, and...
You don't like to leave?
Well, I know the poor chap's dead and all that, and there's nothing one can do, but all the same.
Don't you worry, old man. You cut along to wherever it is. I'll stay till they get here. My name's Roger Bassington French, by the way. I've come down to see about a house.
Oh, Bobby Jones.
Like the golfer.
Not a bit like a golfer.
It's 5 minutes past, Vicar.
Well, I'll give him 5 more minutes, Roberts. Wretched boy. Punctuality may be the politeness of princes, but not apparently in my parish. It being the feast of St. James the Greater, we shall now sing, unaccompanied, I'm afraid, hymn number 557, For All Thy Saints, a noble song. If you cannot do a thing properly, my dear Bobby, it's far better not to do it at all. Ah, thank you, Mrs. Roberts. That smells quite delicious. I know that most of your friends have no idea of time, but there is one who must never be kept waiting. For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful.
Amen. I'm sorry, Dad, but it really wasn't my fault. I was keeping guard over a corpse.
You were what?
Keeping guard over a poor blighter who stepped off the cliff. He must have gone straight on and over.
Was he killed outright?
No, unconscious. He died just after Dr. Thomas had gone for help. Well, I felt I couldn't just push off and leave him. So when another fellow came along, I just passed the job of chief mourner on to him and legged it here as fast as I could.
Will nothing, not even sudden death, shake your deplorable callousness? Everything, however solemn, appears to be nothing but a joke to your generation.
Oh, it isn't like that, really, Dad.
I hesitate to say this, Bobby, but it's 8 months now since you were unfortunately invalided out of the Navy. Seems to me you're losing your grip of things.
There isn't much to grip around here, Dad.
Exactly. I think it's time you set about finding yourself a job.
Well, actually, I may be onto something. I'm going up to London tomorrow to have a look.
Oh, it's the first I've heard of it.
Yes, well, I thought I'd better find out more about it first.
Well, good prospects.
I'm thinking of going in with Badger Beeden.
My dear Bobby, you can't be serious.
His great-aunt died. And left him £300. He's taken a lease on a garage. Second-hand cars, that sort of thing.
Young Beeden is completely irresponsible. He's never done a hand's turn in his life.
Well, that's not fair, Dad. It's just that he's not had much luck.
Luck? Divine intervention would hardly compensate for his complete lack of application. When he started that chicken farm, what happened?
Foul pest.
And when his uncle set him up in a stockbroker's job in the city, what happened?
Fired.
And when his father and his mother sent him off to Australia, what did he do then?
Came back.
Exactly.
Well, Australia?
Well, how long are you proposing to be away?
Back the day after tomorrow, Dad. That's all.
Well, it grieves me to say this, Bobby, but I fear you will not go with my blessing.
I didn't think that I would. Badger? Badger? I know practically nothing about cars.
Oh, it doesn't matter, old chap. I tell you, we're bound to succeed. Put a lick of paint on, and that's all the ordinary fool notices. Pretty, don't you think? Hmm? It sticks a bit, that's all. Yeah. You see why I need you.
Oh, I say, I'm most frightfully sorry. Frankie?
Bobby!
I haven't seen you for ages.
Well, I haven't seen you. Are you planning to spend the entire journey on the floor, or are you going to sit down and talk?
The ticket's the wrong colour.
Leave it to me.
Everything all right, your ladyship?
Yes, perfectly, Inspector. But my friend Mr. Jones has just popped in to see me for a bit. Won't matter, really.
The gentleman won't be staying for long, I expect. I shan't be round again till after Bristol.
What can be done with a smile?
Nonsense. Father's habit of tipping everybody 5 shillings whenever he travels that does it.
I must say it's nice to see you.
I heard you'd given up the Navy. Didn't axe you, did they? Not at your age.
Eyes.
You've always had trouble with your eyes.
I heard you'd given up Wales for good.
After the party I went to last night, I thought even the castle couldn't be worse, in spite of the drafts in the bathrooms.
What was the matter with it?
No, nothing really. Just like any other party, I suppose that was it. It's odd, isn't it? I've little to worry about. I've a choice of houses to live in, hideous family jewels, creditless shops. It's all families, isn't it?
What is you, do you think?
Women with children, playing together, happy. Oh, Polly, I'm so tired of everything, aren't you?
No, not really. I don't get the chance.
By the way, what's all this about a man falling over the cliffs?
Oh, yes, poor devil. Dr. Thomas and I found him. How did you hear about it?
In the paper. Doesn't say anything about you and Dr. Thomas, though.
Well, no. No, it wouldn't, would it? What does it say?
Fatal accident on Welsh coastal path. The victim of the recent tragedy at Marchbolt was identified late last night by means of a photograph he was carrying. The photograph proved to be that of Mrs. Leo Cayman. Mrs. Cayman was communicated with and journeyed to Marchbolt, where she identified the deceased as her brother, Alex Pritchard. Mr. Pritchard had recently returned from Siam. He'd been out of England for 10 years and was starting on a walking tour. Inquest will be held in Marchbolt on Monday.
I believe I shall have to give evidence.
Bobby, how thrilling! I should come and listen to you. I suppose nobody pushed him over, did they?
Pushed him over? Good Lord, no. Why?
Well, make it much more exciting, wouldn't it?
Life was not then extinct.
No. Deceased was still breathing. There was, however, no hope of recovery. The man's back was broken.
There were no signs of any violence, such as might have been administered by a third party?
I can only say that all the injuries present are such as would have been occasioned by a man falling on the rocks 50 or 60 feet below, sir.
There remains, then, the question of suicide?
That is perfectly possible. Whether deceased walked over the edge or threw himself over is something about which I cannot give an opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you.
That will be all.
Thank you, sir.
Lieutenant Robert Jones. Cry, you say? What sort of cry?
Well, I mean, a cry.
A cry for help?
Oh, no. No, more a sort of shout, you know. In fact, I wasn't quite sure that I'd heard it.
A startled kind of cry?
Oh, that's more like it. Sort of sound a fellow might let out if a ball hit him unexpectedly.
Or if he took a step into nothingness when he thought he was on a path.
That's it, exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. This is Leo Cayman.
I swear by Almighty God, the evidence I shall give shall be the truth. The whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You are Mrs. Amelia Cayman of 17 St. Leonard's Gardens, Paddington. You are related to the deceased?
He was my brother.
Mr. Alex Pritchard. Mrs. Cayman, when did you last see your brother?
The day before he fell. He said he was going on a walking tour of Wales. He had only just recently returned to this country from the East. He was so looking forward to it.
He was in a happy and normal state of mind?
Yes.
You had no money troubles, or troubles of any kind in his life recently?
Well, there was no sign of it.
What was his profession, Mrs. Cayman?
Prospecting. Well, that's what he called it. He was very seldom in England.
You know of no reason at all which might have caused him to take his own life? Thank you, Mrs. Cayman. I don't think we need distress you any further. Members of the jury, it is your task to decide how this man came by his death.
Sorry I was late. I caught you all bit, though. I thought you were charming good.
You make it sound like a school concert.
Well, there's little enough to do down here. An inquest was a perfect godsend. Mind you, I thought death by misadventure was a bit of a dodo. I'd hoped for a suspicion of foul play. They all seem regrettably straightforward.
I would never have believed it.
What?
The girl in the photograph I found could end up looking like that.
Well, it looks exactly like her. Photograph was touched up, that's all.
So touched up, you wouldn't have known them for the same person. Anyway, where did you see it?
In the Marchborough Times.
It probably reproduced badly.
Seems to me you're absolutely batty over a painted-up, rattled bitch. Yes, I said bitch like the Cayman woman.
Frankie.
Well, you shouldn't be so ridiculous. What is ridiculous is to quarrel about the damned woman. How about a game of golf tomorrow? You can't be as bad as you used to be.
Can't I? No, I'm not sure I'm all that keen on golf at the moment. That's how all this started.
Well, who knows? You may be lucky. Perhaps there's a lunatic at large, a pusher of people off cliffs. Will he strike again? Does Bobby Jones, the vicar's son, hold the key to the mystery that's terrifying the inhabitants of this sleepy little Welsh town?
Go home.
10:30?
At the golf club.
I still think it looks exactly like her.
Ah, there is Bobby. Bobby?
I do hope you'll forgive the intrusion, Mr. Jones. My husband is arranging for my poor brother's body, and, well, I was just wondering...
Mrs. Cayman was wondering if you had anything else you could tell her.
Yes, you see, I know you tell the coroner everything you could, but, well, I did just wonder if there was some small personal thing. You do understand, don't you?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
You see, I still can't believe it. My poor Alex. Poor Alex.
Oh, I know. Absolutely grim.
I think it's a little chilly in here. Perhaps I'd better put a match to the fire.
You see, if he had left any last word or message, I should like to know it. It would mean so very much to me.
As a matter of fact, he didn't.
Nothing at all?
No. Well, as a matter of fact, nothing at all.
Merciful to pass away unconscious without pain.
Yes, well, that is something to be thankful for. I did say that I would meet my husband back at the hotel.
You must put your trust in the great healer, time. You're sure you wouldn't like us to walk you over to the hotel?
Oh, well, that's very kind of you, but I should like a few moments to be alone, you know. Goodbye, Mr. Jones. Goodbye, Mr. Jones.
Oh, goodbye.
Really, Bobby, you had a tolerable education. In moments of stress, when an unfortunate human being demands words of comfort, is that the best you can do? Absolutely grim.
I'm sorry, Dad, but I didn't know what to say. Well, it's all very well for you. You're doing it all the time.
I don't know what you mean.
Kettle's on, Vicar. Tea won't be a minute.
How is Styleham, Mrs. Roberts?
Oh, market won't be worth going to soon. Fewer stalls every week.
Mrs. Roberts, have you seen last week's copy of the Marchbolt Times by any chance?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bobby. I thought you and the Vicar were finished with it. I used it on the fire.
Well, I don't suppose it matters.
You see, you can do it when you try.
Well, at least I didn't go into the sea this time. Good Lord.
What?
I've just remembered something.
Well?
That woman, Mrs. Cayman, when she came round yesterday and asked if the fellow had said anything before he died, I told her he hadn't.
He hadn't?
No. No, I've just remembered now, he did. But it wasn't the sort of thing they meant. That's why I didn't think of it, I suppose.
What did he say?
He said, why didn't they ask Evans?
What a funny thing to say. Nothing else?
No, he just opened his eyes and said that, quite suddenly, and then he died.
Well, I wouldn't worry about it. It wasn't important.
No. Still, I wish I just mentioned it. Dear Mrs. Cayman, I have just remembered that your brother did actually say something before he died. I think the exact words were, why didn't they ask Evans? I apologize for not mentioning this yesterday, but I attached no importance to the words at the time, and so, I suppose, they slipped my memory. Yours truly, Robert Jones.
Just going to the shop, Mr. Bobby.
Oh, Mrs. Roberts. Mrs. Roberts, would you be kind enough to put this in the pillar box for me?
Oh, it's no trouble. Forced in a few for the Vicar anyway.
Ah. Well, I'm damned.
Really, Bobby?
Oh, sorry, Dad. Forgot you were there. But somebody's offered me £1,000 a year.
What did you say, 1,000? £1,000?
Hold in one, Dad.
But that's quite impossible.
Well, a bit unlikely, I agree, but not impossible.
Well, who are these people?
Some shipping firm in Buenos Aires. I've been highly recommended. They don't say by whom.
Remarkable. Remarkable.
They must be complete lunatics, I agree.
Nothing of the kind. The South American firm obviously realizes the value of a young man of integrity.
All the same, Dad. Why me?
Well, ex-officer of the British Navy, Vicar's son. They want you to telegraph your acceptance immediately and be ready to sail for Buenos Aires within the week. Well, it's rather short notice, I grant you.
Dad, I can't.
What on earth do you mean?
Well, I'm fixed up, aren't I? With Badger.
Even Badger Beeden can't be such a complete ass to imagine you're going to turn down an offer of £1,000 a year.
Well, it's no good, Dad. I can't let him down. He's counting on me.
Well, why is he counting on you? Will you tell me that?
Well,
Simply because he knows that you're as big a fool as he is.
How beautiful you are. They wouldn't believe me. They wouldn't believe me.
Really, Robert?
Oh, sorry, Dad.
How sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. Haven't you anything to do?
Tell you the truth, Dad, I'm a bit bored. I thought I might go for a walk.
Do you a power of good, young man. Risk 12 miles or so across country. Wish I could come with you.
suggestion about them, I'm afraid, but the choice was singularly limited.
I thought you were in London.
My dear, as soon as I heard about you, I tore back. It's most exciting to have a romantically poisoned friend.
I don't know whether morphia is so very romantic. I hope you realise you're now gazing upon a medical phenomenon.
To listen to you, one would think nobody had ever been poisoned before.
Jolly few have been poisoned with 8 grains of morphia and got over it. Dash it all, Frankie, you don't seem very impressed.
Well, I'd spare a thought for the people who poisoned you.
Whatever for?
Must be pretty sickening for them. All that morphia, and there you are, alive and kicking.
Oh, I never thought of it like that. Do you know, Dr. Thomas thought I'd done it deliberately?
Deliberately?
Yes. He says anybody who plays golf the way I do should be forgiven for taking the easy way out. Someone must have put the stuff in my beer while I slept. Apparently, even the dregs were lethal.
Which just goes to prove that what I said on the train was true.
What did you say?
That man Pritchard, or whatever his name was, didn't fall over the cliff at all. He was pushed.
Oh, Frankie.
Well, it's obvious, darling. I mean, who would want to put you out of the way? Haven't any enemies that you know of? Well, there you are, then.
Where?
Well, it must have been something to do with Pritchard. You had seen something that you weren't supposed to see, or so they, whoever they are, think. Bobby, well, has anything else out of the ordinary happened?
Well, there was that letter offering me a job for £1,000 a year in Buenos Aires. People I'd never met.
Well, there you are, then. First, they try to get rid of you by offering you a job abroad, and then when that doesn't work, they have to put you out of the way altogether.
But what on earth is it I'm supposed to have seen?
Oh, well, that's a difficulty, I agree.
And anyway, if I had seen anything, I would have said so at the inquest, wouldn't I?
Well, I'll have to go away and think about it. And do I kiss you or don't I?
It's not catchy.
Then I'll do my duty to the sick thoroughly. Magazines and papers. I'm sorry they're a bit out of date. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Lady Frances? Lady Frances? I'm ever so sorry, Lady Frances, but could you come back? I think Mr. Jones has had a relapse.
Bobby, what on earth's going on? Look, I want my tea.
This copy of the Marchborough Times you left me, the one I never saw. Look.
Portrait found on the dead man by which he was identified. Mrs. Amelia Cayman, the dead man's sister, sir.
That isn't the photograph I put back in the dead man's pocket.
It isn't?
No.
But that means that...
Either there must be 2 photographs.
Which isn't likely.
Or
someone took the photograph that you saw and put another in its place. That man that came along after Pritchard had died.
Basington French, if that's his name.
Oh, come on, Bobby. Basington French is hardly a name one's likely to make up. What was he like?
I didn't notice him particularly. He said he was a stranger down here, and something about looking for a house.
Bobby, have you thought? If Pritchard was pushed, Basington French is probably the man who did it.
He seems such a nice fellow.
Yes, but if it was murder, then it all fits. You turn up you're not supposed to. You find the photograph you're not supposed to. They had to do something.
Won't work.
Why not?
If it was the photograph that was so important, whatever was going to be done about me would have been done at once. Otherwise, the chances are that I'd have seen this copy of the Marchborough Times and immediately said, that isn't the photograph I saw. Why wait until after the inquest to have a go at me when everything was nicely settled? Oh, and there's another thing. Basington French didn't appear until after I'd put the photograph back in the dead man's pocket.
Damn. So it's got to be something they didn't know till after the inquest. Don't know why I keep saying they.
I do. Because the Caymans must have been in it as well.
Of course. I bet she isn't even his sister.
Well, it puzzled me all along. I mean, the dead man, whoever he was a gentleman. Mrs. Cayman was in a different class altogether.
But if he isn't Mrs. Cayman's brother, then... who is he? And why was it so important he shouldn't be recognised?
And why was the portrait of Mrs. Cayman put into his pocket? and the portrait of the fair unknown removed.
Was she fair?
She was very pretty.
Would you recognize her again?
Oh, I'd know her anywhere.
Bobby, what was it that Pritchard said just before he died?
Why didn't they ask Evans?
But you didn't tell the Caymans that, did you?
As a matter of fact, I did.
You did?
Yes. Yes, I wrote to them that evening, saying it was probably quite unimportant, and they wrote back, politely agreeing, and thanking me for taking the trouble. I felt rather snubbed.
And 2 days later, you get a letter from a strange firm bribing you to go to South America.
Yes.
Well, what more do you want? Look at it from the Cayman's point of view. Everything's gone off well. Body successfully identified. Verdict of accidental death. Everything in the garden lovely. Then you come along and mess it all up.
Why didn't they ask Evans? I don't see how that could put the wind up anybody.
That's because you don't know.
So what do we do now?
Check up on Basington French. I believe a friend of mine was down here the other day, a Mr. Basington French. He was looking for a house.
Making inquiries about various properties with a view to purchase. He was obliged to return to town the next day, so he couldn't view many of the houses we have to offer. Since he left, 1 or 2 highly suitable properties have come onto the market, and I've sent him on particulars to Merroway Court, Staveley, Hants. But I've had no reply.
He's guilty. He's definitely guilty. I mean, you don't go to a house agent's at 6:30 in the evening, then up to London the following day. Why make the journey at all? Why not write?
I must say you've done jolly well so far.
That's not all. After that, I tackled Inspector Williams.
Oh, what did he say?
He said the deceased had very little on him. 1 handkerchief, not marked, some loose change, a packet of cigarettes, a couple of treasury notes, no letters, and just 1 photograph.
Not the one I saw. Didn't he say anything else?
Yes, could he borrow the castle grounds for the police fete? Oh, and there was a car scene in the vicinity the day that you were poisoned, a dark green Talbot saloon.
Did they get the registration number?
Well, no, not quite. It was, GG something or other.
Oh. There must be hundreds of dark green Talbots in England.
Almost as many as there are Evans in the Marchbold Directory. 482.
I'm thinking of taking for my text this Sunday, and he that was dead came forth. Well, Lazarus, you know, seems most apposite. Oh, I beg your pardon, Lady Frances, I didn't see you.
I've always thought everyone must have been perfectly furious with him. Lazarus, I mean. Oh, there he was, safely tucked away, all that wailing and gnashing of teeth going on, then suddenly he's up and about, making everyone look silly.
It was a miracle, Lady Frances. Oh, good day, Doctor. How are you? Let me take your clubs.
You're very kind, very kind.
This way. Doctor's here.
Just come to take a look at him. Time you were back on the golf course, young man. I'm reduced to playing with people who can play.
There's St. Luke, of course. Thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just.
I hardly think that applies to Bobby, do you?
Well, no, perhaps not. What about that child that Elisha raised from the dead?
Oh, much more fun than Lazarus. I mean, he opened his eyes and sneezed 7 times.
Yes, but as far as I can remember, our dear Bobby didn't sneeze at all.
If he gives you any trouble, Mrs. Roberts, just let me know.
No, you won't do that, Doctor.
Thanks, Dr. Thomas.
Ah, you off, Doctor?
Oh, I must get in a few holes before surgery.
The doctor says I shall be fit enough to go up to London next week.
Good. Now?
Oh, please. I thought you didn't approve of my going in with old Badger.
Easier to check up on the Hampshire Basington Frenches from London than from this remote outpost of the British Empire. Bobby, this is George Arbuthnot. He's a doctor, and we shall need him for a little scheme that I've got on.
Shall we?
Shall also need a car. One of yours will do.
You mean you want to buy one of our cars?
Yes.
Well, that's really very nice of you, Frankie, but I do actually draw the line at taking advantage of my friends.
You've got it all wrong, as usual. No, we really do need a car.
What about the Bentley?
Bentley's no good for what I want it for.
What's that?
Smashing it up.
I don't think I feel very well this morning. She means she's going to have an accident.
How does she know?
Badger Beaton! The last time I saw you, you were head down in the mud and we had to pull you out by the legs. My dear, you haven't changed a bit.
Well, this time I managed it under my own steam.
Frankie wants to buy one of our cars.
Oh, 2 cars. George has got to have one too, and he's crashed his at the moment.
We can hire him one.
Well, come and have a look at what we've got in stock.
They're very smart.
Oh, yes. They look all right. That's the idea.
Now, this is remarkably good value in second-hand...
Trojans?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not that one. The Austin's still got a bit of mileage in it. I understand it should last another week or so.
All right. I'll take the standard. Cash.
Well, first time I ever knew anyone with a title who could pay cash. I'll just get to watch this.
Now, someone please tell me what's going on.
Roger Basington French. I'm on the train. Merroway Court belongs to his brother, and he lives there with him and his American wife.
Whose wife?
The brothers, of course.
The point is, how am I going to worm my way into the household?
Why you? Why not me? Or both of us?
Because, my dear child, Basington French knows you, and he doesn't know me from Adam. And I'm in a frightfully strong position because I've got a title. Very useful things, titles. George and I came down to the village, had a look round. Strangers arriving there would simply stay on a mile, so we evolved the plan.
Who has?
Me and George. Now, this is what's going to happen.
Actually going to sell this to someone.
All it needs is a bit of work.
It needs a new engine, a new gearbox, 4 new tires and some brakes. Let's hope the law of gravity still holds good and it gets down the hill of its own volition.
Frankie, are you sure you know what you're doing?
It's all beautifully planned, I told you. George, off you go.
You're looking very pale, Frankie. Are you sure you're all right?
I made up pale. Wouldn't want me carried into the house blooming with health. Now, look, this is what you have to do. When George waves his handkerchief and I wave mine, start her off.
I'll stay on the running board until the pace gets too hot, and then I'll jump off.
Don't hurt yourself.
Oh, I shall be extremely careful not to. It might complicate matters to have a real accident on the spot of a faked one.
Right. He's there. My turn. Oh, by the way, I better not write you direct. I'll write to George or my maid and get them to pass it on.
Frankie, look after yourself. I mean, don't do anything foolish.
I roll around a bit and make myself dusty?
You might as well. Here, give me a hand. Concussion.
Bye, doggo.
Oh, has there been an accident?
No. The young lady ran her car into the wall on purpose.
Is she dead?
Not yet. She must be taken somewhere at once. I'm a doctor. What is this place?
Merriway Court. Belongs to Mr. Bassington French.
You take her legs, I'll take her head.
I can carry this lady into. She needs to be attended to at once.
Shall I call the doctor?
I am a doctor. I happened to be passing in my car and saw the accident occur.
In here. Is she badly hurt?
I can't really tell till I've examined her.
I'll be in the hall if you want me. Oh, she looks terribly pale, poor child.
George, darling, this won't blight your career, will it? I mean, they won't strike off the register or anything like that.
Probably, if it ever comes out that it...
I won't let it. Don't worry, George. I shan't let you down.
By the by, you'd better be a Christian Scientist.
Christian Scientist?
Well, we don't want any other doctor examining you, do we?
Oh, George, you think of everything.
Now, you will be careful.
I shall be most circumspect. You've got me into the enemy camp. Bless you. Now it's up to me. I don't know whether it's the bang on the head or what it is, but I just don't want to move. I could lie here for days and days.
Well, I wish you would. It gets lonely here sometimes. Tommy! Play quietly. Poor Lady Frances will never recover with you making all that noise.
Lady Frances is malingering.
Actually, it's marvelous to see him playing and enjoying himself. He's had so many accidents recently. Last winter, he nearly drowned, and then this spring he fell from his swing. Roger was... My brother-in-law was terribly upset because he was swinging him at the time. You know, pushing him up high the way children love.
Well, he certainly looks splendid now.
Henry doesn't like him playing with the local children, but you see, there's no one in his...
Playing with the local children never did me any harm. Quite the contrary.
Well, I know we're overprotective, but he is the only child.
The son and heir. It's understandable.
If anything were to happen to Tommy, I don't know...
Nothing will happen to Tommy.
Oh, Roger. Lady Frances, may I present the black sheep family? My brother-in-law, Roger. Roger, this is Lady Frances de Wint.
Who made such a marked impression on the park walk.
Roger, Ross said you were back. Have you brought my foot?
Tommy, how many times have I told you? You mustn't ask for things.
Nonsense. Promise is a promise, isn't it, old chap? Well, don't you worry. I've got your fort, and your cowboys, and your Indians. They're all in the hall. Off you go.
Oh, Roger, you spoiled him.
Henry on there.
You're back, then.
Are you joining us for tea?
Tea? No, I don't want any tea. Watch must have stopped. What time is it?
10 to 4.
It can't be.
Promise you it is.
God's sake, tell those children to go home.
It was getting chilly anyway. I'll just close the window.
I must go back to my study. Do some accounts. Damned head gardener thinks I'm a fool.
I have offered to do the accounts for
Fat
you.
lot of use you'd be. Here today and gone tomorrow.
I'm sorry about it.
It must be very boring for him, my butting in like this.
Oh, Henry doesn't mind that. Henry doesn't mind anything these days.
I'll go and have a word with him.
Oh, Roger, I'm glad you're back.
Hey, steady on, old chap.
Is that the afternoon post?
Yes, sir.
How many times do I have to tell you to bring it straight to me?
Very good, sir.
Put that lot on my desk. I'll deal with them later.
Dad! Oh, Bobby! Is that you?
What are you doing here?
Had to come up to sort out that dreadful mess about the new hymn books. I ordered 3 dozen in red Morocco. And that fool Lewis sends me 2 dozen black.
How are you, Dad? Is everything all right?
Everything is not all right. That young woman who was taking your place, only temporarily, I trust, doesn't seem to appreciate the fact that congregations like ours like their hymns taken at a leisurely pace. Onward Christian Soldiers may have been written to help a group of small children to climb a hill, but there's no reason why she should attack it in quite such a vigorous manner.
Oh, good morning, Vicar.
Good morning, Badger. I trust the venture prospers.
We sold 3 cars in 5 days. Only one was brought back. Bloke said we must have given it an injection or something to get it going in the first place.
Remarkable. How are you keeping yourself, my boy?
No more trouble, Dad, if that's what you mean.
Oh, talking of which, a friend of yours was kindly inquiring for you.
A friend?
A tall, stooping man with very strong glasses. He stopped me just as I was going into the vestry. He seemed most anxious to know how you were. I gave him your address. I expect he'll be looking you up soon.
When was this, Dad?
Just a few days ago.
Would you like a cup of tea, Vicar?
If you'll excuse me, I think I must catch the 12:40 from Paddington. Take care of yourself, my boy.
And you, Dad.
You play a very good game.
No, I don't. I'm too lazy to practice, but it's kind of you to say so.
Lady Francis.
Oh, please, please call me Frankie. Everyone does.
You'll think I'm quite mad, I know. After all, I barely know you. But I do feel I have to speak to someone about Henry. And I know instinctively I can trust you.
Do you think you should?
Last night I caught you watching him. You see what I see, don't you? The abrupt changes of mood, his appearance, the eyes.
Yes. Yes, I have noticed.
It's morphia. I'm sure it's morphia. Or some sort of opium.
Morphia?
I first noticed it about 6 months ago. He was complaining of sleeplessness a good deal. How he first came to get the wretched stuff, I don't know, but I think it began then.
How does he get hold of it?
By post. I'm almost certain. Like yesterday, for instance. You saw how he was at tea time. Something arrived in the afternoon post. By dinner time, he was a different man.
Oh, Roger. Where does it come from?
I know one thing. No reputable doctor would let him have it.
Why are you telling me this?
I don't know what to do about Sylvia.
You think she doesn't know?
Either she doesn't know or she doesn't want to know. If only he'd consent to go for a cure. There's a place quite near here, actually, run by a Dr. Nicholson, Canadian, a very clever man. Henry likes him, too.
My, you two look as if you've been very energetic.
3 sets, and I lost every one.
I hope you haven't let him tire you out.
I thought we might make up a party. Ask the Nicholsons over. You'd like Moira Nicholson. She's a pretty little thing, isn't she, Sylvia?
Well, men seem to think so. Judge for yourself.
She has the most appealing eyes.
That's exactly what Alan Carstairs said. Someone who came down here a few weeks ago with some friends of ours. He seemed quite smitten by her, didn't he?
Looks a little sad.
It's hardly surprising. Living in a sanatorium surrounded by depressives and drug addicts can't be much of a life.
Either she worships her husband or she's scared to death of him. I can never make out which.
He's a very forceful man.
You don't like him?
No, I don't like him. I don't like him at all.
2 loads of morphia turning up within days of each other can't be a coincidence.
That would mean that Bassington French would have had to be around in Wales on the very day Bobby was poisoned. When was it exactly?
Let me think. Tuesday I lunched with the Parkinsons, and Wednesday was the first night of that new review. That was the 16th. It must have been the 16th.
All you have to do is find out where Roger was on the 16th.
Oh, that's going to be very easy, isn't it?
Look, that run on the Black 7, bring the 2 across, and you'll clear the King of... I'm sorry. It's maddening, isn't it?
Quite maddening. When you smile, are you sure we haven't met before? Recently, quite recently. Wasn't it that party of Lady Shane's at Claridge's? The 16th it was.
Oh, he couldn't have been there. The 16th was Tommy's birthday. We had the most ghastly children's party. How I'd have got through it without Roger, I just don't know.
Besides, if I had met you before, I should never have forgotten.
That's the extraordinary thing about this place. When nothing happens most of the time, the most trivial things become memorable.
Well, if you think this is quiet, you should try Wales. Mind you, we do have the odd bit of excitement. We had a man fall off the cliff last month. We were all thrilled to the core. Rotten for him, of course. But it did give us something to talk about.
Was that a place called Marchbold?
Yes, that's right. We live 7 miles from there.
What an extraordinary coincidence. That must have been your man, Roger.
Your man?
I was actually in at the death. Stayed with the body till the police arrived.
What were you doing there?
He had some absurd idea, buying a house down there.
It's not absurd at all. I shall settle down someday.
Well, when you do, settle down near us, not in Wales.
Didn't turn out to be suicide or anything, though.
Oh, no, it was all painfully above board. Didn't you see his picture in the paper?
I really don't remember.
I think I've got a cutting in my bag. Must have been awfully handsome, this Alex Pritchard. Before he was dead, I mean.
Oh, yes, I remember. He looks a bit like Alan Carstairs. I said so at the
There is a
time.
look of him about it, I agree. There's no real resemblance, you know.
Alan Carstairs, I've heard that name before somewhere.
Perhaps he was at Lady Shane's on the 16th.
Oh, he's quite a celebrity in his own way. He's a Canadian. A naturalist, a big game hunter, an explorer. Not that I know him all that well. He came down here with some friends of ours, the Rivingtons, for lunch one day. Very attractive man.
And he fell in love with Maura Nicholson?
With her photograph, yes. It was his first time in this country, I believe. Last year he'd been on tour through Africa with that millionaire man, John...
Savage.
You know, the one who thought he had cancer and killed himself.
Funny. Yeah, Alan Carstairs, looking so like that man who fell over the cliff at Marchbold.
That's Dr. Nicholson.
I thought they were coming to play tennis this afternoon.
Well, they said they were.
My dear Sylvia, I'm the bearer of sad tidings. Moira has a slight migraine. I'm afraid we won't be able to make up a set this afternoon.
Oh, my guest will be very disappointed. May I introduce Lady Frances Derwent? Lady Frances, Dr. Jasper Nicholson.
How do you do?
Lady Frances has created quite a stir in the district.
I have.
Earl's daughter survives the unorthodox arrival at Merroway Court. You know, there was one thing that intrigued me.
Yes?
The doctor who was passing, the one who brought you in here, he must have had a most curious character. To turn his car around before going to the rescue?
Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, young Reeves, the messenger boy, he came from Staveley on his bicycle, and no car passed him. Yet he comes around the corner, finds the smash, with the doctor's car pointing in the same direction as he's going, towards London. You see the point.
Good morning, Dr. Nicholson.
Good morning, Thomas.
Have you come to see my fort?
Oh, not today, I'm afraid, young man. Sounds most impressive. I look forward to hearing all about it when you come to tea tomorrow.
Tea?
Oh, Thomas has made an assignation with my wife. Didn't he tell you?
Tommy, have you been inviting yourself again?
No, of course he hasn't. And I'll show you the rabbits. Shall we say 3:30?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Nicholson.
I'll drive him over myself.
Fine.
Bye.
He's fond of children.
He says he's not, but the Tommy's special.
I suppose he came to Tommy's birthday party then.
Oh, no, he was away that weekend.
Dear Bobby, I think it's about time you came down. Get a chauffeur's livery, ours are always dark green, and put it down to Father's account at Harrods. I hope you have the moustache under control, and remember your name is Hawkins. It's all right, no one will ever recognize you. People just don't look at chauffeurs. Come down here and ask for me. You'll have to put up at the pub and get what local information you can there, particularly about a Dr. Nicholson who runs a place for dope fiends. Several suspicious circumstances about him, like he owns a dark green Talbot saloon, was away from home on the 16th when your bear was doctored, and is altogether far too interested in my accident. Au revoir, my fellow sleuth. Love from your successfully concussed Frankie. Oh, and P.S. I think I've identified the corpse.
Over there.
You shouldn't have said he could go then.
If Tommy ever found out what he does to those poor rabbits...
What's the matter with the rabbits?
Oh, he uses them for drugs, tests, experiments. All that sort of thing.
What about the people? Have you ever thought about the suffering and torment they go through? Can you imagine what it's like to get used to a drug and then have it taken away from you? People have gone raving mad. And all you can think about are rabbits.
The evening.
Everything all right then, Hawkins?
Yes, my lady. She's been thoroughly overhauled.
That's all right then.
Quite a bus you've got there.
Yes, sir.
You'll get some pace out of that.
I do. You'll put up at the Anglers Arms in Staveley, Hawkins. I'll telephone you tomorrow if I want the car.
Fancy a game of croquet before tea?
Only if you promise to let me beat you.
Has the young lady had many accidents?
More of a danger to herself than other people.
Ah, it's women, in it. Oi, woman behind the wheel. Well, it's hardly natural, is it? Still, she's lucky to end up where she did. It's a nice house, Merroway Court.
Only big place around here, is it?
Well, it's the Grange. Been empty for years until it was taken over by this Canadian doctor. Nicholson, his name is. There's some very queer goings-on up there, if you ask me.
Goings-on?
Well, there's them as don't want to be there. And there's them as put away at the Grange by their relations. Oh, I assure you, Mr. Hawkins, the moanings and groanings and shriekings are going up there you wouldn't believe.
What's the matter?
Go away.
No, I want to help you.
Please. No one can help me.
At least tell me what it is that frightens. You're the girl in the photograph.
They're coming. You can't help me unless you go now. You must go now, please.
Mr. Hawkins? Mr. Hawkins?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was miles away.
You're wanted on the telephone.
Hello?
Hello? Hello, Frankie. Lady Frances Derwent here. Is that you, Hawkins?
Yes, my lady.
I want the car, 10 o'clock, to take me up to London.
Very good, your ladyship.
It is a nuisance having to go up to London today, just because Father insists I see his doctor.
He's perfectly right. I'd half thought of asking you to give me a lift.
That would be lovely.
But on second thoughts, I don't think I'd better go up today. That wretched brother of mine's even odder than usual. I don't want to leave Sylvia alone with him.
I can imagine how you feel.
You will be back this evening.
Yes, of course.
I'll look forward to that.
Goodbye.
You are coming back.
I told you this evening.
Promise.
I promise.
Gone.
Don't worry, Sylvia. She'll be back.
Right. I think we can talk.
Do you talk to Hawkins?
You're not Hawkins.
I know that, and it really is quite a strain. I mean, for instance, when does one say "m'lady," and when does one say "your ladyship"? It's the sort of thing the real Hawkins knows, and I don't. I could get caught out. I think I'm molting.
Really is frightfully good.
It's also frightfully uncomfortable.
Now, I'm nearly certain that the dead man was someone called Carstairs.
Carstairs?
Alan Carstairs. He was a big game hunter and explorer, and he was brought down to the Basington Frenches by some people called Rivington.
And I've found the original of the photograph.
Not the one in the man's pocket.
Yes.
I mean, that's marvellous. Where?
In the grounds of Dr. Nicholson's nursing home.
You know, I'm afraid of that man, Nicholson. I think he's definitely suspicious.
You mean you don't like him?
Well, Sylvia doesn't like him either.
Frankie, what do you think's at the bottom of all this?
Morphia.
Morphia?
It's the only thing that you and I and Dr. Nicholson have in common.
I don't understand.
It's too much of a coincidence. First someone tries to poison you with morphia. Then Roger's worried his brother's a morphine addict. Then Dr. Nicholson turns up in charge of a clinic who uses morphia. What's more, on the day that you were poisoned, Roger was at Merroway Court and Dr. Nicholson wasn't. And remember that he drives a dark green Talbot saloon. Well, not exactly evidence, I know, but I must admit it fits nicely.
Almost too nicely. And Roger? What about him?
You know, I think you're wrong about him.
In what way?
Well, you've cast him as the villain of the piece, haven't you?
Not at all. You worked it out logically, and you decided he must be the villain of the piece.
course, of the photograph.
Yes. Roger was on that cliff top when the man went over. No one else could have changed it.
But that's all we've got against him, really, isn't it?
All?
Oh, well, I know, but now I feel he's innocent.
Frankie, you haven't fallen for Roger, have you?
Don't be absurd. Bobby, I just feel there must be some sort of innocent explanation.
I don't see how there can be, especially now that we've found the girl in the photograph actually in the neighborhood. That seems to clinch the matter. Frankie, duck! The question is, did Alan Carstairs get the Rivingtons to bring him down to Staveley deliberately, or was it just chance? Or was he simply on the track of the girl?
The girl?
She may have been abducted. He may have come to England to find her. That might explain why he was carrying the photograph.
If he tracked her down to Staveley, what was he doing in Wales?
Obviously, there's a lot we don't know yet.
Like Evans.
Evans?
Why didn't they ask Evans? We haven't had any clues about Evans's at all. Evans' part of it must be to do with Wales. When we get to London, I think we'll go to Brook Street, farthest away, and the house practically empty. We can decide what to do about the Rivingtons there.
Rivington, builders, Rivington, dental surgeon, don't think so, do you? Miss Florence Rivington, Cunlate Rivington, DSO, Tite Street, Chelsea. Oh, that sounds more like it. There are 4 more, but we've got to start somewhere, and I think Tite Street sounds as good a place as any.
But what are we going to say? Oh, think up a few good lies, Frankie. I'm useless at that sort of thing.
You'll have to go, you know.
Oh. Like this?
No. No, as a junior partner in a solicitor's firm, I think.
Ah. Well, that seems the most gentlemanly role. I was afraid you might think of something much worse than that.
Just a minute. Here we are. Mr. Frederick Spragg. You are a young member of the firm of Spragg, Jenkinson and Spragg of Bloomsbury Square. They're father's solicitors. I suppose you'll have to stick with that moustache.
I'm afraid it's sticking to me.
And if you're borrowing father's solicitors, you'd better borrow his clothes.
They'll sue me for false representation, or whatever it's called.
No, they can't. The only living Spragg's about 100. Oh, Sloane 0629. Yeah, hold a second, please. He's a terrible snob and eats out of my hand.
Yes, I know, but...
Don't worry, I'll fix him if things go wrong. Good afternoon. This is Spragg, Jenkinson and Spragg.
The young woman who phoned from your office said the matter was urgent. Mr.
Spragg? Yes, it is, rather. It's about our client, Mr. Alan Carstairs.
Oh, yes.
Perhaps he mentioned we were acting for him.
I believe he did. But of course, I know all about you, anyhow.
You do?
You acted for Dolly Travers, didn't you, when she shot that dreadful dressmaker man? I suppose you know all the details.
We know a lot that never reaches the general public.
I suppose you must. But tell me, did she really? I mean, was she really dressed as that woman said?
The story was contradicted in court.
Oh. Oh, I see. Well, do sit down.
Thank you.
Mind you...
now, about Mr. Carstairs. He left England very suddenly, as perhaps you know.
No, I didn't know. We haven't seen him since.
Ah.
Mind you, I always had my suspicions about Dolly Travers.
She did get off, Mrs. Rivington.
Oh, but I asked you.
To return to Mr. Carstairs, you saw him last when?
Oh, 6 weeks ago, 2 months. I really can't remember.
But surely, I thought...
Oh, yes, of course I can. It is when we took him down to Staveley. He just arrived in England and we were going to Scotland. So I said to Hubert, let's take him down with us to the Bassington Frenches. They won't mind. So we did, and of course they didn't.
He didn't know the Bassington Frenches?
No, but I think he liked them. Though something seemed to upset him. He was very quiet and moody on the way home. But then, of course, he's a Canadian. Canadians are so awfully touchy, don't you think?
You don't know what it was that upset him?
I haven't the least idea.
Did he meet any of the neighbours? Go for a walk, anything like that?
No, it's just ourselves and them.
Ah.
But it's odd you're saying that, because he did ask an awful lot of questions about some people who live nearby. A doctor, something or other.
Nicholson?
Oh, do you know him?
Well, I have had
Oh, I
occasion...
must say, he sounds absolutely fascinating.
Did Mr. Carstairs know the Nicholsons?
No. And that's what made it so odd, because he wasn't a curious man as a rule. But he wanted to know all about them, how long they'd lived there, where they came from, all that sort of thing.
Did he say why he himself was in England?
No. But we thought, Hubert and I, that it might be something to do with that poor millionaire friend of his, who died so tragically. Now, what was his name, you know?
Savage.
John Savage. Alan was very upset about that. Do you know, some doctor actually told the poor man that he had cancer, and he killed himself. Disgraceful. I mean, only last spring our doctor told poor Hubert that he had mumps, when all it was swollen glands. Thank God.
To return to Mr. Carstairs, we're trying to trace him rather urgently, you see, and he hasn't left an address. And when we heard him mention that he was a friend of yours, we thought you might be able to help us.
Oh, I see. No, I'm afraid I can't. We haven't seen him since.
Ah. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Rivington. I do apologize for having taken up so much of your time.
It's so interesting, I think, the way the legal mind operates. And, of course, it's fascinating to know that Dolly Matravers really did.
Mrs. Rivington, I said nothing at all.
Yes, but then you lawyers are always so discreet, aren't you?
So it was just chance that took him to the Basington Ventures.
And while he was there, someone mentioned the Nicholsons.
You see, it is Nicholson who's at the heart of the mystery, not Roger. Oh, looks quiet. I wonder where they all are.
He wasn't expecting me back so soon. He's probably out pushing people over cliffs.
Thank you, Hawkins. That'll be all. I'll telephone you when I need you.
Anyone at home?
I interrupted you. I came back sooner than I meant.
Mrs. Basington French is very upset.
Yes. I rather gathered that.
She had to know the truth. I want her to persuade her husband to place himself entirely in my hands. She should mention the matter to you.
I hardly think she will do.
If she should, try to persuade her that it really would be best. You see, an addict can destroy not only himself, Lady Francis. He can destroy everything he loves best.
You said you'd help me. Perhaps I shouldn't have come.
Of course you should have come. I'll do anything. Anything in the world to help you. Oh, don't be frightened. You're safe now.
You must think me mad. You must think me quite mad coming here like this. It's just that I'm so frightened. I'm so terribly frightened.
I know you're not mad.
I wouldn't blame you if you did, finding me in that dreadful place with all those...
Look here. I know nothing about you at all. Tell me. Tell me everything. Tell me who you are.
You mean you don't know? I'm Moira Nicholson. Dr. Nicholson's my husband. He's going to murder me.
Thank you. I don't understand. Why should your husband want to murder you?
Because he wants to marry Sylvia Bassington French.
But she's married already.
He's arranging for that.
What do you mean?
He's trying to get Henry admitted to the Grange as a patient.
And then?
Once he was there, something would happen.
What does Sylvia's brother-in-law think of this?
Roger? He's rather nice, I think. But she's the sort of person who would be very easily deceived. Jasper's working on him to try to persuade Henry to come to the Grange. Don't let him come, please. If he does, something awful will happen. I know it will.
How long have you been married to your husband?
Just over 2 years.
Haven't you ever thought of leaving him?
How could I? I've nowhere to go. I've no money. People would think I was mad. A poor, pathetic woman going around saying her husband was trying to murder her. I've seen it in his eyes when he looks at me. Who would ever believe me?
Well, I believe you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Look, if I'm going to help, I've got to ask you some questions. Did you ever know a man called Alan Carstairs?
Yes.
You knew him before you were married?
Yes.
Did you at some time or other give him your photograph?
Yes.
Has he been here to see you since you were married?
A few weeks ago.
Did your husband know of this?
No.
Are you sure?
I don't understand.
Would you say your husband was a jealous man?
Jealous? No. Possessive? Yes. Why are you asking me all these questions?
Well, look, there's a lot I have to tell you, but it isn't safe to go on talking here. And besides, you've got to meet Frankie.
Lady Frances Derwent? I thought you were her chauffeur. The landlord said
No,
you...
trust me. I'll explain about that too. But we've got to find some place to talk where there's no danger of being overheard. Lady Frances, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Nicholson, the original of the photograph.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I do see now why the sight of Mrs. Cayman at the inquest came as such a shock to you.
I must be an absolute fool not to realize.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't understand.
Oh, no. No, of course you don't. Look, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you rather a shock. This friend of yours, Alan Carstairs, well, you've got to know he's dead.
Tell me.
He fell over the cliff at Marchbolt, the place where I live. I and the doctor there happened to be the ones to find him.
So that's why he never came back.
He had your photograph in his pocket.
Dear Alan.
So, when I came face to face with you that night, you can imagine how I felt.
You recognized me very quickly.
I'd have recognized you anyway.
When did all this happen?
I think it was just after he came down here.
Did he mention anything about going to Wales?
You don't, by any chance, happen to know anyone called Evans, I suppose?
Evans? No, I don't think so. Why?
Just before your friend died, he regained consciousness and said...
Why didn't they ask Evans?
It's a very common name.
And then these terrible people, the Caymans, turned up at the inquest and identified him as Mrs. Cayman's brother, Alex Pritchard.
And your photograph had gone, and this Cayman woman's was in its place.
Here in the east, we'll have the Comanches.
It says on the box there's Sue.
Well, it's the principle that counts. Now, where's that cannon?
Do be careful, won't you? Mother says you must never put it in one, even though it's only clockwork.
Quite right. We'll put it here, I think, then we can really let them have it. You do it, old boy, will you? Just about there, I think. Tommy.
Yes, Father?
I just wanted to say, if ever I seem a bit, well, you know, short-tempered, doesn't mean anything, you know. Don't always feel very well. Nothing personal, you understand?
I think so, Father.
Henry, I need to talk to you.
I was just watching for the post, my dear.
He's not due for nearly an hour. Tommy, if you go down to the kitchen with Mary, Cook has a surprise for you.
Come along, Master Tommy. What's the surprise, Mary?
Don't want to spoil it by telling.
And we think that Roger Basington French pushes Pritchard, or Carstairs, over the cliff.
Roger?
He was in the right place at the right time. And more important, he was the only one who could have removed the photograph.
I'm sorry, but there's something I must ask you.
Ask away.
Well, I don't know how to put this without sounding... Well, did you really come down here by accident? Or did you come because you suspect my husband?
I give you my word of honor. We'd never even heard of your husband till we arrived down here.
Only, you see, I think my husband suspects you. What was that?
Heavy-footed rabbit, probably. What does your husband suspect?
Well, that your accident when you drove into the wall, that it wasn't really an accident at all.
He's quite right. It wasn't.
Wasn't?
I drove into the wall on purpose, and Bobby came down and pretended to be my chauffeur. The whole thing was staged because Bobby wanted to, well, how does one put it, get a line on Roger Basington French.
I'm sorry, but I think that's absurd. Roger's weak, wild perhaps, but pushing someone over a cliff, I mean, why should he? He and Alan Carstairs had only met once at lunch at Merroway Court. There's no motive. I just don't believe it.
And I don't believe it either.
The fact remains he's the only one who could have taken your photograph.
There's an easy way to settle it. Why don't you ask him?
How on earth did you come to guess that?
You did?
Yes, I had to.
But why?
Well, now, here am I mounted guard over a stranger's dead body. I see a photograph sticking out of his jacket pocket. I look at it. I can't believe it. It's the photograph of a woman I know. A married woman. And a woman I suspect is not too happily married. What's to be done? An inquest? Publicity? I acted on impulse. Took the photograph and tore it up.
So that's it. If only you knew.
Knew what?
I can't tell you at the moment. But please trust me. I do see now why you took the photograph, but was there any objection to saying that you recognized the man, that you met him down here only the week before?
My dear girl, are you quite mad?
Alan Carstairs. You did meet Alan Carstairs?
The man who came down with the Rivingtons. The dead man wasn't Alan Carstairs.
Oh, but he was. You must have recognized him.
No, I didn't see his face. He had a handkerchief spread over it.
How beautifully and curious men are. I feel terribly sorry for her.
For Moira Nicholson? Why?
Being married to a man like that.
Yes, I know what you mean. I don't much care for him myself.
And yet you want Henry to go to his clinic.
Well, that's different. That's professional. What's more, I think Sylvia's about ready to agree. I spoke to her this afternoon.
Sit down, Roger. I've got to prove to you that Dr. Nicholson is a dangerous criminal.
What?
And that your brother is in mortal danger.
Even if you're right, what does it prove? Mind you, if you could show that Nicholson had been in Marchbolt on the day of the cliff tragedy, or if you could find any definite motive linking him with Alan Carstairs, it might be different. It seems to me you're ignoring the real suspects.
Who?
The people you say made the false identification in the first place, the Haymans.
Caymans.
Seems to me as if they're in it, up to their hilt. I mean, look at their insistence on knowing whether the poor fellow said anything before he died. They obviously thought that your friend Bobby Jones was in possession of some knowledge that was dangerous to them. So they try to eliminate him.
Bobby says it's absolutely grim.
You don't think they'll try again if they get on his track?
Then we must get on to theirs first. I can't think why we haven't done so before. Now you know what Moira thinks her husband is up to.
Do you still think your brother should go to the Grange?
Oh, Roger, I've been looking for you everywhere.
Oh, would you like me to?
No, Frankie, don't go. There's no point, is there? You know all there is to know. I've been blind. Blind. You both saw what I never even suspected. Or was it simply that I closed my eyes to it because I didn't want to see? Couldn't see. All I knew was that Henry had changed so, but I never suspected the reason. But it's going to be all right, Roger. He's agreed. He'll go to the Grange and he'll put himself and Dr. Nicholson...
No.
Oh, no.
There are other places not so near at hand.
But half an hour ago you were all for Henry's going to the Grange. Why have you changed your mind?
It's simply that I've been thinking it over, and I think there are other places
Well,
that
it's
might...
no good. I want Henry and Dr. Nicholson's care and no one else's.
Just let me telephone him one more time.
But I shan't change my mind, Roger. I don't know how to apologize. You must think of us.
Sylvia, if I'm in any way an embarrassment, I'll go.
Oh, no, please stay. Poor Henry, he was so upset at my knowing. He cried. He promised he'd do anything he could for my sake and for Tommy's.
I'm sure he will.
Dr. Nicholson's warned me not to count on promises. I've said such dreadful things about that man, yet when it was necessary, he was the one person who told me the truth.
We all change our mind sometime or other.
Look, I know I haven't paid last month's bill, but you can't run a second-hand car shop without spare parts. I'm not asking you to throw good money after bad. Just, but, excuse me, just think of it as an investment.
Nicholson's out. I left a message.
I still don't understand. You suggested this plan. It's all been arranged and Henry's consented.
Sylvia, I am Henry's brother.
What was that?
Sounded like...
Tommy!
Henry! Henry! It's locked. Stay here, look out!
It's all right, I'll just let see it.
Stand back, I'll have to break it. I feel this is the best way out. It's too late. Can't fight it now, I know. Want to do the best I can for Sylvia. Sylvia and Tommy. God bless you both, my dear. Forgive me.
I think you'd better let me take over.
Has something happened to Henry?
Look after her. Take her away.
Sylvia,
For God's sake, tell me what's happened.
Everything's all right. Dr. Nicholson's there.
There's nothing to be done. Death must have been instantaneous. Poor fellow. Obviously felt he couldn't face the music. Drugs always end in tragedy. Always. Well, there'll have to be an inquest, of course. I'll telephone the police.
Oh. The key's not in the lock.
Oh, perhaps it's in his pocket. Operator. Operator! This is Dr. Nicholson of the Grange. Put me through to the police station at once. There's been a fatality in Merroway Court. Get over here as fast as you can. Bring the police station.
I better call my chauffeur. The sooner I go.
No, please. Don't do that, Lady Frances. Sylvia will need a friend with her tonight. Preferably a woman.
If you think I can be of any help. 374. This is Lady Frances Derwent. Could you bring my chauffeur to the phone, please? Something awful's happened. We must meet. Tomorrow. Same time, same place as today.
Frankie, are you all right?
Oh, Lady Frances, could you give me a hand to get Sylvia upstairs, please?
Henry?
Oh, no, Sylvia, Sylvia!
Henry!
No, Sylvia, please.
Henry!
Sylvia,
Come along.
calm yourself.
Everything much better.
Poor old Henry.
It sounds absolutely ghastly.
Grim.
It is quite certain he did commit suicide.
Must have been suicide. We were all in the conservatory with Roger when we heard the shot.
By the way, Nicholson seems to have appeared rather conveniently.
He'd left his spigmum or something or other behind earlier, and we'd come back for it.
Frankie, suppose, for a minute, Nicholson shot old Henry.
Having first persuaded him to write a suicide note.
That would be the easiest thing in the world to fake.
A fake that would convince the dead man's wife. His brother.
Look, if you're in such a state, the suicide seemed the only way out. How good, how typical would your handwriting be?
Go on.
Nicholson shoots Basington French, leaves the farewell letter, nips out, locking the door, only to appear a few minutes later as though he'd just arrived.
It's a good idea, but it won't work. And to begin with, the key was in Henry's pocket.
Who found it there?
And Nicholson did.
There you are, then.
Where?
What's easier for him than to pretend to find it?
Oh, but I was watching him, remember? I'm sure the key was in his pocket. Sylvia saw him drive up when we ran round to the study windows. In fact, she brought him round. I hate to say it, but he has a perfect alibi. 3 deaths.
3?
Alan Carstairs, Henry Basington French, and there, but for the grace of God, goes you. Who's next?
Moira.
Good Lord, I'd forgotten all about her.
So I'd noticed. We must persuade her to leave the Grange at once.
We could send her down to Wales. Take Father's mind off his beastly gout, and she'd be perfectly safe at the castle.
If you can fix it, Frankie, nothing could be better.
It's extraordinary how men like helpless women. Bring the car round 10:30, and I'll rescue your precious Moira for you.
It's grim. Absolutely grim. Starts off as some sort of adventure. Why didn't they ask Evans? Well, why didn't they? Might have saved us an awful lot of bother. Poor little boy.
I've an idea about Evans. I've a feeling that although he's been the starting point, he really doesn't matter at all.
Sometimes I don't think there is an Evans.
It's rather creepy, isn't it? No wonder Moira gets the horrors here.
Be careful. Don't do anything silly.
I've called to see Mrs. Nicholson.
Lady Frances.
Good morning, Dr. Nicholson.
Oh, you don't come with bad news about Sylvia, I hope.
No, she was still asleep when I left.
Well, eventually she will have to face the brutal reality of her husband's death, but for the first few days we must try to soften the shock, the sense of loss. I'll call round this afternoon, make sure she's all right.
I'm sure you're very busy, Dr. Nicholson. I don't want to trouble you. I really came to see your wife.
Well, that's very kind of you. Very kind.
Well, if she isn't up yet, I could sit and wait.
Oh, she's up.
Oh, good. I want to persuade her to come to me for a visit to Derwent Castle. She's practically promised her.
Really? Well, I had no idea that you'd met my wife, Lady Frances.
I met her yesterday, when I was out walking, and I recognized her at once from her photograph at Meroway. She said she'd never been to our part of Wales, so I thought, well, there's no time like the present, don't you agree?
I'm sure my wife would have enjoyed that very much indeed.
Would have.
Unfortunately, she went away this morning.
Went away?
Just for a little change.
You don't know where she's gone?
London, I imagine. You know, shops, theatres, you know, the sort of thing.
Good. Well, I'm on my way to London now. If you'll give me her address, I could call on her this afternoon.
Well, she usually stays at the Savoy, but in any case, I shall be hearing from her in a day or so. I believe in perfect liberty between husband and wife. Yes, I think the Savoy will be the most likely place for you to find her. So very kind of you to think of asking my wife to stay, Lady Frances.
I told them you'd come, I told them. You are going to take me away, aren't you? I do so want to come home. Leave me alone!
Be a good girl. Be a good girl. We've written to your sister. We told you that yesterday. Won't you trust us? Nurse, would you show Lady Frances out, please? Come on. Let's go upstairs.
Poor creature.
What'll happen to her?
The doctor will give her something to quieten her down.
Morphia.
Whatever he thinks is best.
Drive round the corner. Up a track or something. We've got to talk. Brandy. Brandy.
Frankie, are you all right?
No, I'm not all right. Oh, I'm shaking. I'm actually shaking. Now I know how a mouse must feel when a cat won't quite kill it.
Gone away? When?
This morning, he said.
I don't believe it. Maury would never have left without letting us know. Where's she supposed to be?
He says he doesn't know. She may be at the Savoy. On the other hand, she may not be. He believes in perfect liberty between husband and wife.
I knew it. We should never have let her go back there yesterday.
Bobby. You don't think she's dead, do you?
Hello? Bobby! Thank heavens, a friendly voice at last.
Listen, I need your help. Meet me at that cafe, Fred's or whatever it's called, in 3/4 of an hour. Come on the motorbike and bring me some clothes. Oh, and Badger, in my suitcase you'll find my old service revolver.
A revolt? A gun?
Robert Jones, I don't like the sound of that at all.
Oh, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. But you do see, don't you? If Moira's in that house, I've got to get her out.
You will be careful.
Yes. Yes, of course. Now, I think Hawkins, the chauffeur, will have to disappear. I'll move over to the station hotel at Ambledover. It's only a few miles away from the Grange.
But if you're not Hawkins, who are you if I have to get hold of you?
I quite like being Mr. Spragg.
I think I'm going to do a little sleuthing of my own.
Oh, frankly...
Follow up Roger's hunch. The Caymans. The rotten old Caymans who we now know were not what they seemed. You still have their address.
Yes, of course, but I don't want you doing anything that might be dangerous.
Look, if it'll make you feel any better, I'll get Dr. George Arbuthnot to help me.
It won't. Well, I suppose he's better than nothing. Anyway, if the Caymans are as guilty as you seem to think they are, I'll bet you anything the birds have flown.
As the Caymans have obviously fled, can't we go to lunch?
Don't give up so easily, George.
Badger!
I've wrapped your gun in your pajamas.
Well, I don't want it now, you fool.
I still wish you'd tell me where you've been and what's going on.
If I could tell anyone, I'd tell you. Look, so far, if anyone's known anything, something's happened to them. And I don't want anything happening to you or Frankie. That's why I made her come back to London and wanted you to meet me here instead of the garage.
Why?
In case it's being watched. How's trade?
Could be worse.
When I get this cleared up, if ever I do, we'll really get down to it, I promise.
Shall I take your chauffeur's uniform?
Oh, no. No, I better hang on to that. You never know. Well, I'd better get back to Staveley, I suppose. Oh, forget I said that, would you?
Well, here we are. Well, that was a waste of time. All we've found is a railway timetable open on page 37. Chipperfield, Chipping Camden, Chipping Norton, Chipping Sodbury, Chipping Somerton. Chudley Knighton? Well, where are you going to start?
John Savage.
What?
Where have I heard that name before? Oh, I know. Sylvia Basington French, when she was talking about Alan Carstairs, who'd been on safari with Savage.
Well, what does it say?
Sir Robert Porchester broke his leg yesterday when his yacht, the ill-starred Andorra, was rammed leaving the harbour. Could there be a jinx on this unlucky boat? It will be remembered that its last owner, the millionaire John Savage, committed suicide on learning he had cancer.
Well, where does that get us?
Mrs. Rivington told Bobby that Alan Carstairs was very upset about Savage's death. It could be.
Could be what?
It could be that we've been barking up the wrong tree. Supposing it was Savage's death that Alan Carstairs wanted to find out about, and supposing he was on the track of something...
All right, supposing. How do we find out?
Why would anyone want to kill a millionaire?
Money.
Something in his will?
Perhaps he left it all to Evans. You know, why didn't they ask Evans?
Good heavens, I'd forgotten all about him. And you know, when I do think about him, I think he's a complete and utter red herring. Come on, finish your coffee. We're going to take proper counsel.
Where are we going now?
To see Mr. Spragg.
This is indeed a pleasure, Lady Frances. And how is Lord Marchington? Well, I trust?
Suffering from gout and bad temper. In other words, much as usual.
Well, now, to what do we owe this totally delightful but unexpected visit? Blackmail? Indiscreet letters?
I want to look at a will. I don't know where you go and what you do, but there is somewhere you can pay a shilling, isn't there?
Well, Somerset House.
I wanted to look at a will of a Mr. Savage. Mr. John Savage.
Well, now, that is extraordinary. I really don't know what to do. Perhaps if you could give me your reasons.
Oh, no. No, I'm afraid I can't.
Lady Frances, I really believe I ought to warn you.
Warn me?
There's something afoot. Either something is afoot, or we have to accept the most incredible coincidence. And as a legal man, I have difficulty with the coincidence. I have been impersonated, Lady Frances. What do you say to that?
How did you find out?
You know something of this business.
Yes, I'm afraid I do. Oh, this is all my fault. It was just a joke. We wanted something to do.
And who had the idea of passing himself off as me?
Room number 6, Mr. Spragg.
Thank you.
Mr. Spragg, it wasn't just anyone passing themselves off as you. Actually, it was the young Duke of... No, I mustn't mention any names. It just wouldn't be fair.
Oh, you bright young people, what troubles you land yourselves in. High spirits can sometimes lead to complications that can be extremely difficult to settle out of court.
I feel terribly ashamed. I suppose it was Mrs. Rivington who gave us away. Oh dear, what exactly did she tell you? Dear Mr. Spragg, it's really too stupid of me, but I've just remembered something that might have helped you the day you called on me. Alan Carstairs mentioned that he was going to a place called Chipping Somerton. I don't know if this will be of any help to you. I was so interested in what you told me about the Maltravers case. Yours sincerely, Edith Rivington.
You can see now why I took it that some extremely questionable business was afoot, whether connected with the Maltravers case or with my client, Mr. Carstairs.
Alan Carstairs? Was a client of yours?
He consulted me. Yes. Do you know the gentleman?
He came to see you about Mr. Savage's will, didn't he?
I gave him my opinion that nothing could be done about the will unless Mr. Savage's relatives, neither close to second cousins living in Australia, were prepared to contest it. But undue influence is incredibly difficult to prove.
Undue influence?
Mr. Savage was a hard-headed businessman, but he was clearly as wax in this woman's hand.
Oh, that woman. Alan got was so heated about her, I never fully understood what had gone on.
Ocean trips are notoriously dangerous, and middle-aged bachelors. Pretty woman, husband prepared to say tactfully in the background. Fatal combination. And by all accounts, this Mrs. Templeton was particularly good-looking. Certainly Mr. Savage found her so attractive that he accepted her invitation to go down and stay at her cottage at Chipping Somerton. Well, there's no doubt he came more and more under her influence. And then came the tragedy. Mr. Savage feared that he may be suffering from, well, certain disease.
Cancer.
The subject became an obsession. The Templetons persuaded him to go up to London and consult a specialist. This he did. Here, Lady Frances, I preserve an open mind. But that specialist, most distinguished man, swore at the inquest that Mr. Savage was not suffering from cancer, that he told him so, but that he was so obsessed by his own belief that he refused to accept the truth of it.
So what do you think happened, Mr. Spragg?
Well, it seems likely that Mr. Savage may have thought the doctor's reassuring words were not true. But what is known is that he came back to Chipping Somerton in a state of great mental distress. He sent for a solicitor, reputable local man, who there and then drew up a will, which Mr. Savage signed and delivered over to the solicitor for safekeeping. Later that same evening, Mr. Savage took a large overdose of chloral, leaving a letter behind in which he explained that he preferred a quick, painless death to a long, painful one. The jury brought in their usual sympathetic verdict of suicide while of unsound mind.
Poor man.
That, Lady Frances, is one thing he was not. By his will, he left a generous sum to various charities and the sum of £700,000, free of legacy duty, to Mrs. Templeton.
£700,000?
That, if I may say so, was Mr. Carstairs' reaction. His contention was that the will was completely uncharacteristic of Mr. Savage, who had no liking for organized charities and strong views as to money passing through blood relationship. I had to tell him that possession was 9 points of the law, and Mrs. Templeton already had possession.
And no one knows anything at all about her?
Went to live in the south of France and refused to enter into any communication on the matter.
Well, with £700,000, who can blame her? Mr. Spragg, you've been wonderful. Simply wonderful. I feel too ashamed.
You bright young people, you should be more careful.
You've been an angel.
Young Duke. Miss Cook, bring me in Burke's Peerage, will you?
Going out this time of night, sir?
A spot of fresh air on the bike before turning in, you know. Don't sleep too well.
You look out for potholes, sir. Young George Chaplin came off his bike last week just outside the greengrocer's. Nasty mess.
Oh, I'll be careful. Don't worry.
Sylvia.
Nightcap, George.
No, thanks. Early start tomorrow. Bad news?
From Roger Basington French. The inquest is the day after tomorrow. He wants me to go down.
nothing this way. Only the limb of that old cedar tree down. Gate's been left open. Nothing else. I reckon it's all clear this way. That's the trouble with working with loonies. You end up hearing things.
Bobby's disappeared.
Your friend Bobby Jones, alias Hawkins.
And Moira's vanished.
Moira.
We're sure Nicholson knows where she is. Bobby thought it would be easier to keep an eye on the Grange from a hotel in Ambledover. He registered on Wednesday evening. I sent him a wire to say that I'd look in on him on the way down to the inquest, and the wire was there. He wasn't. Landlord said he'd gone out for a breath of fresh air that first night and hasn't been seen since.
Well, perhaps he was on the trail or something. No. Moved on. Didn't have time to explain.
What, leaving all his things behind?
Did you bring them with you?
I didn't think. Should I have?
Well, there might have been something. Some clue.
You think I'm silly to worry?
No, I don't think you're silly. I don't like the sound of it either.
You asked me to let you know when the coroner arrived.
Yes,
so.
thank you, Ross. We'd better go through.
Suicide while of unsound mind.
You don't think it was?
Do you?
I think we were most fortunate to have Dr. Davidson as coroner. He was both tactful and considerate. Everything went off perfectly.
Almost too perfectly, wouldn't you say? Like a good stage performance.
I think I know how Lady Frances feels. My brother was murdered, Dr. Nicholson. I mean it. The law may not regard it as such, but murder it was. Whoever induced my brother to become a slave to that drug murdered him. As surely as if they'd struck him down.
To induce a man to take drugs is indeed a most terrible crime. You came down by car, Lady Frances. No accidents this time, I hope.
No. No, I think it's a pity to go in too much for accidents, don't you?
Perhaps your chauffeur drove you.
My chauffeur's disappeared.
Indeed.
He was last seen heading for the Grange.
Perhaps you've been paying too much attention to local gossip, Lady Frances. I myself have heard the wildest stories. For instance, that my wife and your chauffeur have been seen talking together down by the lake.
Haven't you heard from your wife yet?
Not yet, Lady Frances.
Aren't you at all worried about her?
Not as much as you seem to be about the disappearance of your chauffeur.
Frankie, these just came for you. Thank you for coming.
Are you sure you're all right?
Oh, I'm fine. But how I would have managed without Jasper, I just don't know.
Well,
Though everyone's been most wonderfully kind.
Sylvia, I really must be going.
Of course.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Excuse me.
Dear Frankie, I'm on the trail at last. Follow me as soon as possible to Chipping Somerton. You better come by train and not by car. The Bentley's too noticeable. You're to come to a house called Tudor Cottage. I'll lay the directions for finding it below. Don't tell anyone where you're going, because the deeper we get into this, the more sure I am there is no one at Staveley we can trust. No one. I know it's grim, but you've got to believe me. Yours ever, Bobby.
Interesting?
Not really.
You'll stay to lunch.
I must be off.
I've hardly seen you.
There'll be other times. Oh, Roger, would you do me a favor? The Bentley's making a funny tick-ticking noise, and I can't possibly cope with it breaking down on my own. Would you mind if I left it here?
No, not in the least. Providing you let me drive you to the station. And don't worry too much about Bobby. Perhaps he's gone to London.
Turn right out of the station, away from the village. This is the track that will take you to the cottage. When you can see the cottage, hoot like an owl. Twice. I'll be waiting.
Bobby. Oh!
Frankie.
Oh, we've been out for months, haven't we? How did they get you? Was it after you read that letter?
What letter?
You know, telling me how to get here.
I never wrote you a letter. Frankie, you didn't.
Oh, but I did. Honestly, it sounded exactly like you. Even used the word grim.
Grim? What's that got to do with it?
Well, you're always using it.
No, I'm not.
Even all that about not telling a soul made a ghastly sort of sense. Oh, chloroform. Always did make me feel sick.
Chloroform?
That's how they got me. How did they get you?
Well, I wanted to have a look at the Grange after dark to try to find Moira. I nearly brought it off, too, when somebody must have crept up behind me and given me the most tremendous wallop. I went out like a light.
Nicholson, I'll bet. Sort of underhand thing he would do.
No, it couldn't have been Nicholson. I'd heard him calling from the house only a few seconds before.
Whenever we think it's him, he's always somewhere else.
Well, anyway, whoever it was, why just knock me out? Well, it would have been terribly easy to finish me off. I didn't think Nicholson would stick at a thing like that.
Well, same reason as before. They've got to make it look like an accident.
You don't mean they're going to have another go at me? What day is it?
Friday?
I was knocked out on Wednesday. Dash it all, I've been pretty well unconscious for 2.5 days. I wonder how much morphia they used this time.
Oh, don't start that again.
Well, I must be pretty well bung full of the stuff by now. Frankie, you don't think I'm going to end up like poor old Henry, do you?
Look, I think there's every possibility we're both going to end up like poor old Henry, dead. Too bad I won't be able to use all that information I got from Mr. Spragg.
Oh, the real Mr. Spragg.
He told me John Savage committed suicide, having made a new will, leaving £700,000 to a woman he met on board ship, a Mrs. Emily Templeton, married to Edgar Templeton of Tudor Cottage, Chipping Somerton.
Here?
Here.
By Jove. So do you think it's the Templetons who've got us?
Apparently they're in the south of France enjoying her ill-gotten gains.
Oh. And, Moira?
She's still missing.
If that brute has laid a finger on her,
Frankie, we've got to get out of here. For her sake.
I'd quite like to get out of here for my own.
Oh, let's see if I can undo your hands with my teeth.
That was me.
Oh, sorry. No good. I'm not making slightest impression.
Yes, it's loosening. It's loosening.
Unworthy of you, my dear young lady, to fall into such an easy little trap.
I knew it was you.
And made your suspicions very obvious. Possibly a little too obvious. Wouldn't you say now? At any rate, let me see if you're still comfortable. Up we get. All right. There now. I trust you won't find this too intolerable, but it will only be for a very short while.
What are you going to do to us?
You taunted me, Lady Frances, with being too fond of accidents. Maybe I am. At any rate, I am going to risk one more accident. Lady Frances Derwent, her chauffeur beside her, mistake a turning and turn into a disused road leading to a quarry. The car crashes over the edge. Lady Frances and her chauffeur are killed. Oh, and just to add credibility to the event, it will be made to look as if Lady Frances had most certainly been doing the driving.
You can't count on us being killed outright.
Oh, I promise you, both you and Lady Frances will both be quite dead when your bodies are discovered.
You're making a big mistake, you know. Especially where Lady Frances is concerned.
Yes. Yes, in that very clever letter you forged, you told me to tell nobody. Well, it just so happens I made an exception. I told Roger Basington French. And if anything happens to us, he will know who's responsible.
A very good bluff. But I'll call it.
What about Moira? Your wife, you swine. Have you murdered her, too?
Moira is still alive. How much longer she will remain alive, I really don't know.
You know what annoys me most about this business?
What?
Being hurtled into the next world without knowing who Evans is.
Well, why didn't you ask him? You know, sort of last-minute boon. He can't refuse to tell us now. Not now we're going to die.
What?
That man isn't Nichols.
Frankie.
When I told him Roger knew about the letter, he gripped the candle a little more tightly and the light fell on his face. Yes, I can see it now. It should have had a scratch on it and it didn't. One of Nicholson's patients scratched him at the Grange when I was asking about Moira. That man had no mark on him at all.
Who is it then?
There's only one person it can be. Roger.
Are you sure?
He was the only other person in the room when I taunted Nicholson about the accidents.
Frankie, you know what this means. It really is all up with us now. Moira's a prisoner. You and I are bound hand and foot. Nobody else has the least idea where we are. Badger!
Bobby! Peter, I can't begin to tell you.
Quick, Badger! Pull off one of my shoes. Don't try to talk it through, just haul it off anyhow. Now, chuck it down there in the middle of all that glass. Get onto the bed, Badger, quickly.
Very clever. Extremely acrobatic. How did you manage that, then, I wonder? Perhaps these ropes should be a little bit tighter.
Perhaps they should.
Houdini, I believe, saw the sort of things as a challenge. I do hope you won't be so foolish as to make that sort of mistake. I'm sorry if it's a little drafty now. You'll have to blame your enterprising chauffeur.
Oh, quick, Badger! It's absolutely filthy under there. Have you got a knife? I didn't exactly come prepared for all this.
Oh, do shut up. Look, there's a good chap.
Torch? Hold that a second, would you?
Oh!
Matches. We could burn them up, I suppose.
Oh, Badger.
Penknife.
No, ladies first.
Sorry.
Oh, Badger, whatever rotten things I've said about you in the past, I'm well and truly sorry. Oh, I think my thumbs are going to drop off. Why did you get a good look at him?
Yes, you're absolutely right. No scratches, I can see now. All the same, I have to admit it's a pretty good performance.
I've got cramp. Oh, how we could ever have thought it was Nichols.
What? Who was what?
Our charming friend who's just gone out. I actually thought he was somebody else.
Well, that was Roger Bassington French, didn't you know?
We know now, but how did you know?
Well, I went to Oxford with him.
Oh, it's a chloroform. I'm still dreaming.
Marvelous actor, but bad hat, though. Bad business about forging his pater's name on a check. Old man hushed it up. He was a year or two ahead of me, of course, but I recognize him anyway.
Why didn't you tell us you knew him?
You never asked me. Come to think of it, you never even mentioned his name. In point of fact, you've been jolly secretive about the whole...
Look, what I want to know is what miracle brought you through the skylight?
Keep your voices down.
Well, you see, after you went off, I got into a bit of a mess. I couldn't pay the bills, so I came to find you to see if you'd lend me a fiver.
Oh, Badger.
Badger, if we ever get out of this, I'll get Father to give you as many fivers as you want.
Well, that's not what friends are for.
But how did you find us?
By being jolly cunning, that's how. All you told me was, Staveley. So I looked it up on the map. I reckoned if I couldn't find you, I'd certainly find the Bentley. And I did.
But I left it at Meroway Court.
I found it before I got to, Staveley, actually, outside the,
Station Hotel.
That's right. A village called...
Ambledover.
How did you know that?
Because that's where I was staying.
Well, that's what I thought. Anyway, there were some things, rugs and things in the back of the car, and nobody about. So I got in, and I pulled the rugs over me, and I was about to give you a surprise of your life when you came out.
I did?
Well, the bloke I thought was you. He was wearing your chauffeur's uniform. He had a cap jammed down over his head and was wearing a moustache.
Oh, he must have got it out of my room at the Station Hotel.
Well, he got into the car and drove off, and I was just about to spring out and say, got you, when I realized it wasn't you at all.
Roger again. I'm sorry. I told him everything, where you were staying, that all your things were still there. It's all my fault. But I was so worried about you.
Are you really?
Desperately.
Do you want to know what happened next?
Oh, yes, of course.
Well, finally, we arrived here. He drove the Bentley into the garage. There was a little window, though, and I saw you arrive. I thought you'd come to rescue me, actually. Well, then the chauffeur fellow grabbed you. Well, I'm not a complete fool. I knew something was wrong, but all the downstairs windows are shuttered. So then, I scaled the drain pipe and found that. And then I slipped.
Well, but for you, Badger, my lad, Frankie and I would have been corpses in about an hour's time.
Well, now that I've arrived in the nick of time, what do we do next?
There's only one thing we can do.
Ready, Lady Francis?
Good evening, Mr. Bassington French. You will be if I have anything to do with it. Quick, Badger, get him on the bed!
Right, all right, then. There's no need for all this.
There certainly is. And apart from anything else, it's your turn to find out how jolly uncomfortable it is. How could you?
sorry.
You forged that letter from Bobby, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Another of my talents.
And Bobby?
Bobby was easy. I got him neatly on the back of the neck with a sandbag, didn't I? All I had to do was drag him out to where my car was waiting, shove him in the diggy, and drive him down here. I was back at Merroway the next morning in time to console the grieving widow.
Why did you pretend to be Nicholson?
Why did I now? Partly, I think, the fun of seeing if I could spoof you both.
You were so absolutely certain he was in it up to the neck.
You mean he's totally innocent?
Well, as a child unborn. But he did draw my attention to that car accident of yours. Made me realize you mightn't be quite the innocent young thing you seem to be.
There's something you've got to tell me.
Got to?
No point not telling me now. And it's been driving me mad with curiosity. Who is Evans?
You don't know? You really don't know? That is very amusing. Just goes to show what a fool one can be.
Meaning us?
No, meaning me. Do you know, if you don't know who Evans is, I don't think I'm going to tell you.
Roger.
So, what are you going to do with me?
The police, of course.
Quite right, yes. Ring them up, hand me over. The charge will be abduction, I suppose. I shall plead a guilty passion.
What about murder?
Murder? My dear, you haven't a scrap of evidence.
Badger, I think we'd better go and ring the police.
Hey, what about...
Oh, he'll be all right. I can lock the door.
How terribly distrustful of you. By the way, there's a pistol in my pocket if you'd like it. It's yours, actually. Do be careful, won't you? It's loaded.
Right. I'll go first. Frankie, I think you'd better keep between us.
Frankie, straighten my collar for me, would you? One likes to look one's best when meeting the constabulary. Thank you so very much.
Right. Now, quietly. You must be quite sure and not make a mess of things now.
He's a queer chap, isn't he?
Damn good loser.
We'd better check this room first. We don't want to be taken in the rear. Look.
She's still breathing.
Oh.
Only just. She's been drugged. Morphine again, I shouldn't wonder. We better get a doctor.
Frankie! Frankie, wait!
Look, she's your friend. You want her saved or don't you? Probably cut the wires. Oh, good. Doctor first, police second.
No, police first. They'll bring a doctor. Here, let me.
It's men like you who stop women getting the vote.
Operator! Operator! Oh,
well,
come
I know
on!
It's heartless of me, but I'm going to see if there's something to eat. Come on,
This is an emergency. Police station, this is an emergency.
Not a sausage. Not even the wherewithal to make a cup of tea. You know, I don't believe anyone's lived here for months. I never believed they really said that.
Now, what's all this about, then?
And where's my patient?
Please, Doctor, this
Just
way.
one moment. Could I have your name, please?
I'm Lady Frances Dowd. My father is the Earl of Marchington.
Oh, yeah?
Now, please, will you come?
And I suppose your father's the Archbishop of Canterbury, then, sir?
Oh, no, the Vicar of St. Stephen's, actually. My name's Bobby Jones, and this is Badger Beaton. And upstairs is a dangerous criminal.
Upstairs, sir?
Yes, we've got him tied up, actually. He can't escape.
This way, please. Oh, do hurry.
It's morphine, all right. I'd better get her into a nursing home right away.
He's in there. Oh, sorry. Here you are.
Well, sir?
Ah, there you are.
Don't be so horribly vigorous. Where's Badger?
Still asleep. A chambermaid has unsuccessfully called him 4 times already. Even in London he has great difficulty in waking before 12.
Perhaps you should try running an all-night garage. Oh, how can you?
Oh, it must be the sandbagging. Probably broken up adhesions in the brain.
Oh, have you found the nursing home?
Ah, yes. Now, apparently Maurie's gone to London, to a nursing home place in Queen's Gate. Said she'll feel safer there.
Oh, she never did have much nerve.
Well, anyone might be scared of a cold-blooded murderer like Roger Basington French loose in the neighbourhood.
He doesn't want to murder her. We're the ones he's after.
Toast and weak tea for one, and more toast for you, sir.
Ah, thank you.
Why do you bring out the maternal in everyone except me?
Oh, by the way, what do you make of this?
Where did you find it?
Last night, at the cottage. It had slipped behind the telephone.
Mr. Cayman. Excuse me. Do you know who that is?
No. Well, I've seen the gentleman before, but I can't quite call to mind what... Oh, yes, it's the gentleman who had Tudor Cottage, Mr. Templeton. They gone away now, somewhere abroad, I believe.
With £700,000. No wonder they had to get her and Carstairs out of the way. The start of the whole thing must be John Savage's death.
Look, I still have the notes I made after looking at his will.
Oh.
The witnesses were Rose Chudley, cook, and Albert Mayer, gardener. They shouldn't be too difficult to find. And then there were the lawyers, Elford and Lee, very respectable local firm, Mr. Spragg said.
Right.
But, Rose, you were there when Mr. Savage died, weren't you?
Who, ma'am?
The gentleman from Tudor Cottage, Mr. Savage. You were there when he died.
Who?
The man who left Mrs. Templeton all his money.
Oh, him! The man there was the inquest on. You remember, Fred?
That's right. Used to come and stay quite often, didn't he?
Oh, as to that I couldn't say, ma'am. I'd only been there a few weeks.
Oh, I thought you were there much longer than that.
Oh, that'd be Gladys.
Gladys?
She was house parlourmaid. She was there about 6 months.
And there was just the two of you?
Yes, she was house parlourmaid, I was the cook.
And you witnessed Mr. Savage's will?
Yes, me and Albert Mere, the gardener. I'd never done anything like it before, and I didn't like it, I can tell you.
What happened exactly?
I beg your pardon, sir?
Who called you in to sign your name?
Mrs. Templeton, ma'am. She came down to the kitchen and said I was to go outside and get Albert, and we was both to go upstairs. And there was the poor gentleman sitting up in bed. I'd never seen him before, but he looked ghastly. I said so to you, Fred, didn't I? But Mr. Elford said it was quite all right. There was nothing to worry about. Just to sign my name where he signed his, which I did, and put Cook after it, and the address, and Albert did the same. And I went down to Gladys in the kitchen, all of a tremble. I'd never seen a man look so like death. And Gladys said he'd looked all right the night before. Must have been something in London that upset him. He'd gone up to London early that morning, see, before anyone was up.
And he died when?
The very next day as ever is. He shut himself up in his room that night. And when Gladys went up to call him in the morning. He was stiff and dead, and a note by his bed. To the coroner, it said. Well, then there was the inquest and everything, and Mrs. Templeton went abroad, and she got me a very nice place up north to live. Nice lady, Mrs. Templeton. Pretty, too.
Thank you, Mrs. Pratt.
Good afternoon to you, miss, and to your young gentleman. And I hope you'll both be as happy as what me and Fred is.
I'll catch you up, Frank. Oh, Mrs. Pratt, there was just one other thing.
I found him. Pity he can't talk.
Why?
He might have told us the answer to the one thing that's still puzzling me. Why Mrs. Templeton sent for the gardener to witness the will when the house parlourmaid was there all the time. Why didn't they ask the parlourmaid?
It's odd you're saying that.
Why?
Because that's why I went back, to ask Gladys's name and address.
Well?
The parlourmaid's name was Evans. You've just asked the same question that poor old Alan Carstairs asked after he was pushed off the cliff. Why didn't they ask the parlourmaid? Why didn't they ask Evans?
Bobby, we're getting there at last.
Carstairs must have been nosing around, just as we are, looking for something fishy, and the same point struck him too. That's why he went to Wales. Gladys Evans is a Welsh name. Evans was probably a Welsh girl. He was following her. Someone was following him, and so he never got to her.
All right. So why didn't they ask Evans? With a couple of female staff in the house, why send for the gardener?
Perhaps because both Rose and Albert were chumps.
Bobby.
Sorry, Albert. Whereas Evans may have been rather a sharp girl.
It can't only be that. Mr. Elford was there too, and he's shrewd enough. Oh, the answer's so close. Evans. Why Rose and Albert, not Evans? I'm getting it. Just a sort of flicker. Bobby, if you're in a house with 2 servants, which do you tip?
The house parlourmaid, of course. One never tips the cook. One never sees her, for one thing.
No. And she never sees you.
What are you getting at?
They couldn't ask Evans to witness that will because she would have seen the man making it wasn't Savage.
Well, who was it then?
3 guesses.
Not Roger Basington French again.
Don't you see? Roger impersonated Savage. I bet it was Roger, too, that went to the doctor and made all that fuss about having cancer. Remember Mrs. Pratt said he left early that morning before anyone was awake? I bet poor Mr. Savage never left the house at all. They probably drugged him, kept him in that foul garret they shut us up in while Roger did his impersonation stunt. As soon as the will is signed, they pop Savage back into his own bed, give him an overdose of chloral, and Evans finds him dead in the morning.
I do believe you've hit it, Frankie. But how do we prove it?
I don't know. Yet. But an expert should be able to detect that signature's a forgery.
They didn't before.
Because nobody raised a question.
One thing is certain. We've got to find Evans. She may be able to tell us a lot. Where are we going?
The post office.
Oh. 2 shilling book of stamps, please. 2 shillings, is it? There we are, my dear.
Thank you. Lovely day, isn't it?
Oh, for those as has time to enjoy it.
I expect you'll get much better weather here than we get in our part of the country. I come from Wales. You wouldn't believe the rain in Wales.
We get a fair bit of weather here ourselves. Yesterday now. Very nasty day yesterday. What part of Wales were you from?
Marchbold. Do you know, now I come to mention it, we have someone there who comes from this part of the world. Her name's Evans. Gladys Evans.
Gladys Evans?
Yeah.
Oh, she was in service at Tudor Cottage, but she wasn't a local girl. Came from Wales. Went back there, too, to get married. Roberts, her name is now.
I say, you wouldn't have her address. I borrowed a raincoat from her and forgot to give it back. Now, if I had her address, I could post it to her.
Of course I know her address. Sends me a postcard now and again. She and her husband have gone into service together. Oh, now, where did I put it? Ah, here it is. Mrs. Roberts, the Vicarage, Marchbold.
Thank you.
Yes, you
was at the vicarage all the time, looking after Father, looking after
But
me.
now you can see how dangerous it was from their point of view. You and Evans were actually under the same roof.
With Roger at large, it's still dangerous.
That's it. Back to Marchbolt.
Dash it all, you might have wakened the chap. Do you know what time it is?
Do you? There you are, rotting in bed.
Well, I was feeling a bit rough, that's all.
Well, you'll be feeling a lot rougher by the time I finish with you, my lad. I've been giving a lot of serious thought to you, Badger. I'm going to get Father to clear your debts, buy that garage, and put you in as manager.
I say, how spiffy.
On one condition, that you make that Bentley go like a bat out of hell and get us back to Marchbolt in record time.
Why the hell? Because Roger Basington French is still at large.
Because we finally found out who Evans is.
Because I have a feeling something awful is going to happen if we don't.
Daddy, you're simply not trying.
We're going any faster, we'll take off.
That's it. We're only 7 miles from Meacham. There's an aerodrome there. We could take an air taxi.
My dear girl.
That would be home in a couple of hours.
Anything you say.
Whatever's the matter with you?
Sorry, I just can't get into one of those things.
Why ever not?
Well, you can't stop them and get out.
Oh, all right, you bring the Bentley. Oh, Badger!
Yes, Frankie.
Thank you. Here up, Bobby. Think of Mrs. Roberts and Roger Basington French. Remember, we don't know where he is.
That's true.
There's an outrage on the lawn. That was my daughter.
Come to think of it, that was my car.
Looks quite enough.
What did you expect? Royal Artillery? Come on.
Thank goodness you've come.
Moira,
I'm so glad to see you. I didn't know what to do.
what on earth brings you here?
The same thing that brought you.
You know who Evans is too.
It's a long story.
Come inside.
Oh, no. Please, before we go inside, isn't there somewhere we could go? A cafe that's safe.
I don't understand. Why?
You'll understand when I tell you. Oh, please, Bobby, do come. If you don't, it may be too late. You see, I couldn't bear staying where I was. I
told them I'd rather go to a nursing home I knew in London. It wasn't true, of course. I just wanted to get away by myself, where I wasn't known and nobody would know where to find me. I got on the train, just as it was starting to move. I went along the corridor.
Moira? What is it?
He's followed me. Who? Roger. He's out there in the street with a woman with red hair. Mrs. King. Be careful. Oh, please do be careful.
Oh, damn. Now what do we do?
Has he gone? Oh, he's dangerous, Bobby. Horribly dangerous.
You're sure he was there?
Sure. If you only knew how that man frightens me.
Do brace up, Moira. Don't be such a rabbit.
Now, look here. It's all right. He can't do anything as long as we all stick together. Now, sit down. Drink your coffee. Oh, put sugar.
Oh,
Frankie.
sorry. Very useful things, sugar bowls, don't you think?
Have you gone batty, Frankie? What the devil are you doing?
Taking a sample of this coffee for George Arbuthnot to analyse. It's no good, Moira. I was almost sure before, but then it came to me in a flash. You put something in our coffee, didn't you, when you sent us out there looking for Roger? The game's up, Mrs. Nicholson, or do you prefer Templeton? If she denies it, ask her to come to the vicarage and we'll see if Mrs. Roberts can identify her.
You bitch.
Why do you think she wouldn't come to the vicarage?
You interfering bitch. I'll see you both damned in hell before I let you take what's mine. Stop me! It wasn't me, I tell you. It was him! Him!
Spot trouble, is it?
Nice cup of tea, my lady.
Thank you.
Vicar will be back later.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Roberts.
Evans?
Yes, well, however did you know?
We didn't.
It might have saved us an awful lot of bother if we had.
Well, Evans was my name before I married Roberts.
We went to a lot of trouble finding that out.
There's nothing wrong, is there, sir? I mean, apart from this afternoon.
Mrs. Roberts, does the name Alan Carstairs mean anything to you?
Oh, the gentleman wrote me the letter.
He wrote to you?
Yes, sir. Wanting to see me, sir, about Mrs. Templeton. You see, I was in service with her before I come here with Roberts. Mr. Carstairs said, did I know that she was a dangerous international criminal, wanted by the police? He arranged to meet me on my afternoon off, it would have been. But then he never turned up, so I forgot all about it. Anyway, my Mrs. Templeton could never be anything so wicked. Very nice young lady.
Well, it was your Mrs. Templeton who took a pot shot at us just now in the Orient Cafe.
Never.
Mrs. Roberts, when Alan Carstairs didn't turn up, but a body did, didn't that strike you as odd?
Well, the man at the bottom of the cliff was called Pritchard. I mean, why should a man called Pritchard be a man called Carstairs, I ask you? And then those people that came and identified him.
Oh, the Caymans. Yes, well, believe it or not, Mr. Cayman was your ex-employer, Mr. Templeton.
I said to Roberts, I'd seen a man reminding me of Mr. Templeton. Nearly knocked me down, he did, in the village. Small world, isn't it? Not what we're used to at Marchport.
No. No, it's not, is it?
Still, no harm done, eh?
3 people dead and no harm done.
Oh, fair play, Frankie. We weren't all that bright ourselves.
Well, I thought I did jolly well, considering I had no idea what was going on in the first place.
The person I feel sorry for is Sylvia. Moira will obviously drag Roger into it, and there'll be an awful lot of publicity.
This came for you, my lady.
Frankie, Tommy and I need your help. Desperate circumstances. We'll be at Merroway tonight only. Please come, Sylvia.
Sylvia?
I'm so glad you could come. That tender heart of yours will be the undoing of you, Frankie. You never can resist an appeal for help, can you? And before you start worrying, Sylvia and Tommy are quite safe. They're both in California with Dr. Nicholson. They may even make a match of it. Would be nice if there were at least one happy ending, don't you think? Won't you sit down, now that you're here? I don't have to tie you up this time, do I?
I take it I can't get away.
The windows are shuttered and padlocked, the key's in my pocket. This time there's no convenient skylight in the roof. Unopened. Nothing up my sleeves. No morphia, no chloroform.
Makes a change. Everyone thought you'd fled the country.
That's what they were meant to think. It really would have been too stupid to try and escape while the hunt was on. No, actually, I spent a couple of very interesting afternoons in the public gallery at the Old Bailey watching Moira's trial. Fascinating, wasn't it? Would you like to know the truth about Moira? Moira was an accomplished criminal by the time she was 15. If you hadn't stopped her, helpless little Moira might have ended up running the biggest drug ring in the Western Hemisphere.
With you to help her?
A man must have some ambition.
You were in love with her?
Well, perhaps I thought I was for a time. I was attracted by her. Enormously. We met in America. Things were getting a little too hot for her here. Well, and for me, actually. So we decided to move the entire operation over here. That's why we married her off to Dr. Nicholson.
Married her off?
Nicholson offered her a new name, a new country, a new identity, and perfect cover. A clinic where they cured drug addicts.
It didn't worry you at all? The effect you'd be having on innocent lives?
My dear Frankie, I truly believe that every man has the right to go to hell in any way he chooses.
Like your brother, you mean? Like Henry?
Just as you didn't like Moira, I didn't like Henry. He was a fool. He didn't care about Merroway. I do care. I love it. That time I thought I wanted only two things. Merroway and the money to run it in the way it deserved to be run. And to restore it to its former glory. I nearly got both. You stopped me.
But not in time.
Murder, my dear Frankie, is merely an acceleration of the natural process.
You're a monster.
Not cold, are you? I wouldn't like you to freeze to death.
You are quite prepared to tip me into a quarry.
I shouldn't have enjoyed it.
Did you enjoy killing John Savage?
Savage was the goose that laid the golden egg. Moira found him and set him up. She was traveling as Mrs. Templeton at the time. Well, you know how romantic road trips can be. Savage wrote a letter enclosing a photograph of his beloved and sent it to his friend, Alan Carstairs.
Who you pushed off a cliff in Wales.
I do wish you could have seen me as Savage. I was superb. The plot may have been Moira's, but the performance was all mine. And Savage did die quite quickly, I promise you. Mrs. Templeton conveniently disappeared abroad with the loot so that Moira could reappear at the Grange to be welcomed home by her doting and totally unsuspecting husband. How a psychiatrist could ever trust a woman, I shall never understand.
Having forged your way into £700,000, why didn't you take the lot while you were about it?
Far too suspicious. No, the charity touch was my idea. Sounded so respectable, sort of unfishy.
And yet it was the charity touch, as you called it, that made Alan Carstairs so suspicious.
Well, yes, that and the most appalling piece of luck. Some friends brought him down here for lunch. He saw this picture of Moira, recognized it at once as the woman in the photograph that Savage had sent to him. It's the trouble with Moira. Once seen, never forgotten. Then he followed the trail to Chipping Somerton, and then, like you, to Marchbold.
And ended up with a broken back.
Not like you. Do you realize? If your friend, Bobby, had been an even tolerably competent golfer, you and I wouldn't be chatting here now. Alan Carstairs would have died, anyway. His body would have been washed out to sea, and no one would have been any the wiser. I must say, it was a bit of a blow when I realized he hadn't been killed outright. I was in the most frightful dilemma. It was just as well Bobby had to go herring back to Evensong. Gave me just time to remove the photograph of Moira and plant one of Amelia Cayman in its place. We thought we were home and dry. Then Bobby rocked the boat.
Why didn't they ask Evans?
Bobby knew about Evans, but he didn't know that Evans was at the vicarage. Well, we couldn't afford that link to be made. So Moira drove down to Marchbolt in Nicholson's green Talbot, popped an awful lot of morphia into Bobby's beer and thought that that was that. When she came face to face with him in the grounds of the Grange, she was so genuinely surprised, she nearly passed out. Still, she put Bobby off the trail jolly well. I thought. Didn't you? Oh, Frankie. Merroway would have been a perfect setting for you.
Merroway wasn't yours.
No, but it would have been. There were just two people in the way, Henry and Tommy.
A little boy. A little boy who liked you, trusted you.
I wasn't going to hurt him, only kill him. I wanted Merroway to have an heir. My heir.
You're mad.
I wouldn't say that if I were you. Anyway, before I decided what to do about Henry, Henry decided for me. Fell off his horse. Always was a rotten rider. He had a lot of pain, so I introduced him to morphia. Before long, he was an addict. Our plan was to get him to the Grange as a patient. Once there, Moira would organize his suicide or an overdose. I wouldn't be connected in any way. Then you and your friend, Bobby, got suspicious. So, exit Henry.
He didn't kill himself.
No, of course he didn't.
But you were with me and Sylvia in the conservatory.
Brilliant improvisation, my dear Frankie. But Sylvia was insisting that Henry should go to the Grange, remember? I said I'd come back into the house and telephone once more. Of course, I didn't telephone. I came straight to the study. Henry was sitting at his desk. I said, "Look here, old man," and shot him.
We'd have heard the shot.
No, there was an aeroplane going overhead, don't you remember? I was immensely grateful to it. Well, otherwise I should have had to spin some awful yarn about bursting into the study a second too late, and, well, there wouldn't have been that lovely suicide note. Forging that was easy. Henry's hand had been trembling so much for the past few months, no one would have remembered what his writing looked like. Then I wiped my fingerprints off the gun, pressed Henry's hand around it. I put the key of the study in Henry's pocket, and I went out, locking the door from the outside with the dining room key, which fits the lock. Then I rejoined you and Sylvia in the conservatory.
But you were with me when I heard the shot.
Yes, I was. I placed a bullet in the fire. It gave me just long enough to get back to you and Sylvia before it exploded. I slipped back in here later and removed the evidence. I really was quite pleased with the result. The fact that Nicholson happened to come by at just that moment was a bonus. And you should have realized only a thoroughly innocent man could have behaved quite so suspiciously.
I'll remember next time.
Next time? Of course, Bobby's knight errantry, wanting to rescue Moira from the clutches of her evil, plotting husband, was a bit difficult. That's why Moira came off down to the cottage. And jolly grateful I was to have her around, too. Mind you, you were splendid. I really thought you had me that time.
How did you get away?
Moira. She knew from the noise upstairs that something had gone wrong.
She was drugged.
She injected herself with a large dose of morphia, knowing it wouldn't take immediate effect. Then, while you were phoning the police, she slipped upstairs and cut me free.
But Bobby had locked the door.
One door was locked, but there are two. Looks like a cupboard, I know, but it isn't. The morphia began to take effect, and by the time the doctor arrived, she was genuinely off. Terribly unsubtle, all that stuff with the coffee, I know. But then she had to get you and Bobby out of the way, don't you see? And then again, perhaps she knew how I was beginning to feel about you.
Why have you got me here?
Because I couldn't bear the thought of life without you. Without Merriway. So I thought perhaps a fire. We'd be found clasped in each other's arms in the smoking ruins of the ancestral home. It's all right. I'm far too much of a coward. And far too much of an optimist. No, it's a fast car from here to the coast. I thought I'd borrow the Bentley. Channel crossing, or who knows, perhaps even an Atlantic one. Only to reappear on another continent with a new identity and try to make good all over again. Or should I say bad?
With your share of Savage's money.
No, Moira had kept that. I was to get my share when I married her. So, here I am, you see. No money, no girl, your affectionate enemy, the bold, bad villain of the piece. Unless you come with me and make an honest man out of me. Yes. Well, that's what I thought. So, I'll just walk out of here, lock the door.
You're not going to leave me?
My dear Frankie, you won't come with me, so it's goodbye. You really were a splendid adversary.
You won't get away with this, you know.
Who's going to stop me?
I will, for one.
If you ever get out. I don't think so. Do you? Sure you won't change your mind? No. I didn't think you would.
You sent for me.
I never did. Oh, but I can't tell you how pleased I am to see you. Oh, Bobby, Bobby, let's get out of here.
I telephoned the castle, but nobody knew where you were. Then I got this wire from you saying it was urgent. To come at once. Frankie, are you all right?
Yes. Yes, Roger was here when I arrived.
What?
I'll tell you about it later. Oh, but he really is a remarkable person.
Yes, well, I suppose you always had a fancy for him.
He had charm. So had Moira.
Her face did sort of haunt me. But then when we were in that attic together and you were so simply splendid about things, well, she just faded away. You were so frightfully plucky.
I wasn't feeling plucky. But I did want you to admire me.
Oh, I did, darling. I always have.
Is that all you're going to say?